both in the chamber and also those watching on the live stream, to staff and councillors and to media. Apologies for the slight delay in getting started, but we'll get things underway. So first of all, do we have any apologies? We do have one for Councillor Linwood. Do we have and Councillor Blackler. Move to Councillor Holding, thank you. And second, Deputy Mayor Halilele. Those in favour, we accept those, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, we'll now move on to public forum and welcome to Cheryl Black, who's going to be presenting a petition. So Cheryl, when you're ready, just press the button on the microphone. Away you go. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to present our petition to keep fluoride out of Waitaki's water. Including extras that missed the cut-off, we have almost 600 signatures, and these are just people that we reached with our limited time. However, the strong anti-fluoride feeling remains, just as it did in the 2007 local referendum, which had 69% voting against fluoride. As you know, the High Court found that Ashley Bloomfield's directive to fluoridate was unlawful because he failed to consider the Bill of Rights Act, the right to refuse medical treatment, and the High Court has required a reconsideration of the directives. However, as the Mayor of Nelson wrote to the Minister of Health, this leaves councils in a legal quandary because the directive still technically stands, but has been found to be unlawful. So the Mayor sought a delay until 31st December for the legal position to be made clearer. This request was granted. The Mayor said that his council is nervous of being caught between the government telling them to fluoridate and threatening fines and the strong opponents of fluoridation who may make a legal challenge. Waitaki District Council is in precisely the same position. If you start fluoridating, you will be implementing an unlawful directive. There are big legal holes in what's being done, and you will be open to legal ramifications if you proceed without complying with your broader obligations to us. You will also be breaching several other laws in order to comply with an illegal directive, such as the Health Act. Adding a known neurotoxin to the water supply breaches this law. The Code of Health and Disability Service Consumer Rights. Using the public water supply to deliver medicine breaches our right to informed consent and our right to refuse the service. The Local Government Act requires you to consult our community on matters of importance. This has not been done. And of course, the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. You must clearly and substantively justify why you should violate our fundamental right not to be forced to undergo a medical treatment. Yes, this is a lot of legal pressure. Luckily, you have a golden opportunity to request the same extension that Nelson City Council has granted, an opportunity to legitimately put a hold on fluoridation. Make no mistake, we will file a judicial review if this council decides not to seek this extension. A time extension will allow us all to wait for further data about the efficacy and safety of fluoridation, which we now know is very different to what was previously believed. Recent evidence has shown how ineffective water fluoridation is at reducing tooth decay. The catfish study showed that children exposed to fluoridated water had only a 4% reduction in tooth decay. The Lotus study used 10 years of dental insurance records of 6.4 million adults in England and found essentially no reduction in tooth decay for those living in fluoridated areas. Both these recent studies have come out since the directives, so they change everything. The results of these studies are vastly at odds with the efficacy claims made in the Chief Science Advisor's report, which Dr. Bloomfield relied on in making his directive. That report relies almost exclusively on the Broadbent Dunedin study, but the US National Toxicology Program's review classified the Broadbent study as low quality, and found it to have such a high risk of bias that they considered the results were nullified. So the Ministry of Health is relying on shoddy, biased data to push this medical treatment upon us. So fluoride is not effective? No, it's also not safe. The recent NTP report found that 52 of 55 studies and 18 of 19 high-quality studies found increased fluoride ingestion causes the lower IQ in children exposed as babies, with an average loss of 3 to 5 IQ points. The report found no safe level of exposure. Aside from the brain damage, fluoride harms teeth, bones, the thyroid, our pineal gland, our endocrine system, and more. The evidence that fluoridation is more harmful than beneficial is now overwhelming. That is why we ask you to do the right thing to protect us and to take every avenue that you can to stop fluoridation of Waitaki's water. On behalf of Waitaki's residents who oppose fluoridation, I'm asking the Waitaki District Council to, at the very least, ask the Director General of Health for an extension to 31st of December. We also want you to confirm that fluoride will not be added until at least that date. You will have to forgive us for not feeling reassured when we say you won't fluoridate until there is legal clarity, given that you previously intended to put fluoride in the water well prior to the directive date. Clearly, there has not been proper consideration of the legal risk you face from your own constituents. Please do this and give yourself time for sober second thought about what is at stake here and what you are being asked to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do we have any questions? Ms. Hopkins?
Yeah, I'm interested. You say that you'll seek a judicial, or first of all, can we get a copy of that, the material you just presented to us, please?
Yes.
You talked about the fact that you would seek a judicial review if we didn't go to the ministry and seek an extension. So clearly that would be you against us. Is that your intention?
I'd just like to call on Catherine Henry. She's co-presenting with me to answer some of the questions. Do you have?
Sorry, if that's what it would mean.
So you are aware that at least one council's already tried to do, or are you aware that at least one council's already tried to do that and basically got slapped down to sweet by the very same ministry? Would you be optimistic that if we sought an extension, we'd get one?
My understanding was that that extension was sought before the 10th of November High Court ruling, finding that the directives were unlawful. So the playing field has completely shifted. Now we have an unlawful directive and we've had the Director General ordered to reconsider based on the Bill of Rights Act.
So there was, I think, the Bay of Plenty, I think, applied for an exemption and was turned down within a couple of days of applying for that. Nelson applied for an extension based on the directive not being lawful, and they were granted that through to the end of December. Certainly not our intention to begin fluoridating unless there's a lawful directive that's actually applied. So that's where our position currently is. It's something for councillors to have a talk about later on. We don't have that debate here and now.
So just to clarify then, are we at some point going to actually discuss as a council at this table whether we do want to seek an extension or not? And if we are going to do that, when?
That would require us to request the CE to bring a report to council so that we can discuss it. If we want to do it formally, if we want to do it informally, we can discuss it anytime, obviously. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl and team. I appreciate your input here.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we'll now move on to, we don't have previous meeting minutes, I have had some of those go past me and they are ready, I believe, but they're not here today. I do just remind staff that currently we've got staff in a very difficult position of perhaps not acting legally according to the delegations because they haven't been passed on yet. And just make that note that I am nervous about that current situation, and it's not a good place for staff to be in because we're still waiting, well, they are still waiting on the delegations to be clarified. So we'll now move to item 5.1, my report on page 9.
Sorry, Mr. Kircher, excuse me. We were told that there would be voting, that would be moved to that decision-making process. Ainsley, you told me that would be brought forward and that there would be voting and that we would receive the result now or at the end of the meeting.
There is a report in the agenda, which is basically just receiving the petition. And read through.
So when can we expect to hear from you on that, please?
Well, we'll be, that's about the third item in as far as receiving the petition, but today we don't do the knee-jerk reaction of actually making a decision on based on the petition. It's actually, if we want to get a further report, that's the opportunity to ask for a further report at that time.
Did you want to add something to that?
My understanding under the standing orders was that once a petition has been put to council, it's like a councillor having moved and another councillor having seconded, and you are required to vote on our petition.
We receive it. It would be pretty poor practice if we didn't seek further information and we just voted on petitions that were put in front of us.
Can you give us an assurance of a time frame when we can expect to have an answer to our requests in the petition?
Well, if we have a report come to us at the next council meeting, that'll be in 4 weeks' time. We have no intention to fluoridate until we've got a lawful directive, and we're not expecting that anytime soon. We don't have a time frame for that, but given that Nelson was given an extension through to the end of the year, it would seem that the Ministry of Health doesn't feel that they are going to be sorting out a particular legal issue that they've got in front of them.
Thank you. I understand there was someone else also to speak in the public forum.
Okay, right. I haven't got it in front of me. Sorry, Ray. I had agreed to allow you to speak at the public forum.
I had confirmation that it'd been.
And yes, but I don't have I haven't got the list in front of me, sorry. So anyway, we'll hand the floor over to you. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to go. Right. Good morning, Alex, Gary, councillors, staff, online viewers, and members of the public. Well, here we go. Another year, another rates rise. Not unexpected, as rates will never go down, but the size of the projected increase is extremely disappointing. Maybe I need to move to the Manawatu, but more on that later. Now to analyse the annual plan section of today's agenda. Recently, I've been following the coverage of the District Plan Review Subcommittee's deliberations. Much has been made of getting the wording right to avoid misinterpretation in the future. So I'm somewhat concerned to see the summary in item 6.3, a reference to an enhanced annual plan. That implies irony. That is, it is not an enhanced annual plan. So which is it? I suggest that as there is only one done per year, then it is in fact just an annual plan. But enough of this frivolous chatter. Let's look at the real issues with this annual plan. Or is it a plan? This upcoming year is year 4 of the current 10-year plan, where a 6.29% rates rise was forecast. Council staff have put forward a figure of more than double that, 13.73. So something has gone terribly wrong. In fact, looking at the long-range guesswork of the full 10 years up to 2034, I have calculated that my 2,500 annual bill will move out to nearly 5,500. Not a pleasant prospect. Just next year alone, my rates will increase by $6.66 per week. a real devil of a deal. It's very hard to accept that these continued jumps at a higher level than the inflation rate, running at 4.7% as at December 23, are justifiable, while my income remains fixed at a modest 30,000. That doesn't compare well with the district average of 95,721. Given that our district is known to have a higher than national average of superannuitants, then there must be a hell of a lot of six-figure salaries out there. When you add in the out-of-district consultant salaries, then just like Macrae's, the Waiata Waitaki is proving to be a real goldmine for some people. But back to that 13.73% increase. Why? What are the main drivers? 1, depreciation 4.06. Was it last year or the previous that we talked about a depreciation holiday, not setting aside a pool for assets that were in good order? Was that done? Is this the inevitable catch-up that caused? Can we consider a holiday again? Or are some assets overvalued? This could be concerning, as not only would this create a greater amount needed for the depreciation pot, but the assets portfolio value directly affects our borrowing limits. High value assets leads to high borrowing and debt potential. Number 2, the borrowing costs, 3.80%. This is an easy fix. Stop borrowing. I don't live off my credit card, and I'd like the council to adopt a similar philosophy. Spending money we do not have is not prudential management. 3, the contractor costs, firstly for roading, 7.11%. If inflationary costs are a contributing factor to the extra budget requirements, then surely central government should not be cutting road subsidies, and they should be told this in no uncertain terms. And number 4, the contractors for everything else, 5.29%. Is there too much happening in the world of local government? Are contractors becoming a rare resource and costs escalating accordingly? Are contractors answering to the highest bidder? Is there adequate competition, or is this similar to the supermarket scenario? The council's procurement strategy is to obtain the best price balanced against a reasonable quality, but does the process allow for too high a price situation, which should lead to don't accept, try again later? These 4 items total about 20%. Taking a sharp pencil to them might achieve about a third reduction, but I'm probably dreaming. Even so, a reduction of 6 to 7% would get the overall increase closer to that forecast from 3 years ago. I know I've posed many questions, but I'm not looking for answers, at least not today. I just want our elected representatives and staff to consider more than just spend and do. Our district is blessed with a lot of land, but unfortunately not a lot of ratepayers. But what about the land that doesn't yield rates? The council has to maintain the roads that lead to dock reserves, but the reserves don't yield rates. Also, other government-owned land is often exempt from rates, but still benefits from the council's applied services. Similarly, Church and Marais have reduced to 0 ratings. Maybe it is time for the legislation to change. And while on legislation, there's the perennial GST on rates question. Paying for services based on the property value rather than actual usage is illogical and unfair, making such changes a property tax, not a service charge. Thus, the GST is not really a service tax, it is a tax on a tax. If a council sets its rates take to 46 million, it only receives 40 million to work with, as 6 million is sent off to central government. Is this money ring-fenced, and does the district benefit from what the Beehive does with it? Now, back to the example of Manawatu. Yesterday's press release says council has agreed to a 7.09% rates rise. It has a clear emphasis on core infrastructure, water and roads. My opinion on our local situation: placemaking is not infrastructure. Storytelling is not infrastructure. Giving over 50% of the cost to an event centre is not infrastructure. Water projects, originally planned for 5 or more years from now, is not immediate infrastructure. Transformation, which requires more staff or resource depletion of current staff, is not infrastructure. Dreaming up projects that initially require consultation to plan them, then requires borrowing to implement them, is not infrastructure. There is the often stated stick to your knitting, core services only. Is this the reason for the possible jettisoning of the hospital CCO? I hope the thinking is that it'll perform better under Health NZ rather than just getting rid of a financial millstone around the council's necks. And to be definitely considered, the future relationship between Observatory Village and Oamaru Hospital and the expected benefits to various local health services. And that's me done. Thank you for this opportunity to soapbox my thoughts.
Thanks for those many varied thoughts, Ray. I will not attempt to address any, all of them. There are some. I just make comment on them. Basically, Manawatu is in the bottom about 4% of councils with its rate increase. Most are much higher than that. Our 13.73% is below average in this year. Beg your pardon?
Accuse me, I'm sure.
No. It's just that's the reality of it. It's not a place where we want to be. It's, you know, we've had many years of very low rate increases, and you know, we've driven efficiency and tried to make sure that we are doing the right thing. But unfortunately, there is a major catch up happening at the moment. Over the last 3 years, there's been 27% increase on cost of roading. There's been 30% increase on water infrastructure. There's just very, very high increases coming or happening, in the things that councils do. And that is the problem that we're all facing. That is why we're saying the system around rating is broken. It's not affordable for communities to do all of the things that we're required to do. The things that the placemaking stuff like that you mentioned, I mean, it's peanuts in the scheme of things. The most of the investment is going into infrastructure, and you're just on the equating your own property rates and what they might be. There's a lot of the expenditure is targeted to particular areas, and unless we change how we do how we allocate rates, a lot of those things won't affect your particular rates. They'll affect someone else's. But you know, that's just part of the mix of what we do and where we do it and how that's rated across the community. Just on the loans, I will mention that part. We use loans for equity funding. So we're looking at, if we go and do a major upgrade, it's not just the people who are there that benefit from it. It's the people who are going to be there in 20 years and 30 years. Loan funding gives an ability to spread the cost over. If you had a property and had an upgrade in the water supply and it was $3,000 for your property, if we rated you that in 1 year, that would be pretty unaffordable to try and get that. But what happens if you sell your property next year and someone else moves in? They get all the benefit of that upgrade. Loans help spread that out, and that's where we use loans. We don't use it for operational costs. We try and make sure it's used appropriately, but that's the way it is. And increasingly, all of the things that, because of the volume of things that we're doing, that's the best way to help fund them. So that's a few bits and pieces. Councillor Hopkins has something to add to that too.
Look, just one very quick question, if I may, Mayor Coutts, and thank you for the opportunity to ask it. Ray, if you don't like the rate rise, and trust me, neither do we, would you and the residents group be willing to support council funding things in other ways? In other words, we either do less or find other ways to pay for things. And are you willing to open-mindedly allow us to actually explore that second option?
Alternatively, funding things rather than directly from rates is certainly realistic. I don't want to see a wholesale user pays, you know, every single cent being paid by the user. Otherwise, you get the road repairs to a cul-de-sac going to the 5 houses that are in that cul-de-sac, and that could become ridiculous. But there is a way to actually do a little bit more user pays to make sure, for instance, well, water alone. I mean, okay, we haven't got metered water yet. But I see a situation, if I'm living next door to somebody who's got a family of 4 in a swimming pool and they pay the same amount for water as I do, then I think, hang on, I'm not using as much as they are. How about a bit of user pays in here, which would mean that you throw the meter in. So there's things where it should be spread more equitably. And just to follow up, and Gary, the roading you mentioned specifically about the cost, 27% increase in roading materials and contractors, etc. This is why I say, if the government is cutting the FAR subsidy, why aren't you going to them and saying, hey, what the bloody hell is going on here? The prices are going up and you're giving us less. What fairness is that? Tell them off.
We are going to NZTA, and we are saying exactly that. The local government as a sector is going to NZTA and saying that it's a time where we need more investment and not less. And so, yeah, we're at the stage where actually we're putting, you know, how much do we put into roading that won't be subsidised? So instead of our 43 cents getting another 57 cents in the dollar from the government, our 43 cents is basically having to beat the dollar. So you know, that's where we're at the moment, because we can't go backwards in our roading infrastructure. It's, you know, it's the pressures are on roading are much greater than they've ever been. And our funding partner isn't doing their bit, and they need to step up. Councillors, anything else?
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray. If you would like a more full response to what you've outlined today, feel free to send that through, and we can, yeah. Yeah, no, that's good as gold. We will go to the fluoride petition next, so rather than do the other couple of reports. So for those who were here for that, just to let you know. So councillors now move to, if we go to 6.2. So wait for you to get to there. Sorry, page, whatever that is on, 27. So the recommendations that we have in front of us are that we formally receive the petition. I won't go into all of the detail, acknowledge that it meets most, but not all of the requirements of our standing orders, but note that we've agreed, Alex and I agreed in principle that the petition as submitted will be considered by council. And the fourth one is the bit that where we agree an official response to the petition as submitted for the chief executive to action. So I'm happy to move 1, 2, and 3, and with 4 requests a report from the chief executive for the next meeting. Is someone happy to second that? Councillor Howes, thank you. Do we have any discussion? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, Mayor Kircher, I think the only thing I would probably want is for that fourth recommendation to be a little bit more specific. We have been asked to request an extension, and I don't think it's unreasonable to ask Mr. Palmer to bring us back some advice on that matter. I had thought that the granting of those extensions was off the table, but you are advised that the Nelson quest for that to occur was actually accepted by the ministry. I see no particular reason why we shouldn't seek, on that basis, I see no particular reason why we shouldn't seek request an extension, and at least it might give some certainty, or additional certainty. So I just think that recommendation 4 could perhaps be slightly more specifically worded. So I'm wondering if the mover and seconder would consider that 4 be amended to read something along the lines that we request a report from the chief executive to be presented to the next council meeting, considering the possibility of extension and other matters related to the petition, or other matters arising from the petition, something like that.
Yeah, I expected that would be part of it, without needing to be explicit on that particular aspect, but I'm happy to incorporate it.
Yeah, I'll be happy to incorporate that as well. I think just providing some more certainty or clarity would be helpful.
And just to be very clear, the extensions weren't off the table, exemptions were off the table, because they've obviously been turned down very, very quickly in the past. So extension is a different matter.
Yes.
Okay, any further comments? Put it, those in favour, please say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, now we'll go back to my report on whatever page that was on. Page 9. And I'm happy to take it as read, and if anyone's got any questions, comments, happy to hear them. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kitchell. I do have a couple of questions, But perhaps first and foremost, I'd like to move a resolution based on the comments you make on page 10. You've talked in there about the government's first 100 days and the major changes that have occurred, not including proposed changes to the RMA, which you talk about later. And indeed, I think the comments that you make on page 10 are amplified by the comments you make about the district plan and the RMA on page 15. But on page 10, you say, with such a busy agenda of change and a very large fiscal challenge facing the government, we need to do more to take a strategic approach to Wellington. We want to work with central government more than we do already to help improve the outcomes of our mutual communities. To that end, I would like to move, because I think you're absolutely 120% correct. So I would like to move, arising from this, your report, that council appoints a working party to develop a preferred strategic approach for engagement with central government.
Okay, anyone happy to second that? Deputy Mayor Halalalei. Yeah, I think that would be useful. I think it is something where I think we do need to consider how we do that, how we achieve it, try and get the best value for what we want to see, how we get the outcomes we want to see happen. So, any discussion on that? Hannah?
Yeah, sure. Through the chair, I think it's a really good, it's a really important point. We actually do need someone to actively advocate and lobby for the needs of our community. And if we're just sitting here in the South Island doing nothing, or as much as what we can, it's not the same as having something active and proactive in Wellington. So I'm fully supportive of this. I think it'll help achieve a lot of our community outcomes and aspirations that we have.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question of Councillor Hopkins. In asking us to consider sourcing or employing our own advocacy, are you inferring that the advocacy currently available through LG&Z is not delivering to our needs?
May I answer the question? No, I'm not suggesting that at all. What I'm saying is that the mayor has quite properly said what we, that is to say, this council needs to do more to take a strategic approach to Wellington. We want to work with central government more than we do already. So my view is that there are issues that are particular to us, and there are issues that are particular to rural and provincial New Zealand that I don't think LG&Z is necessarily the best advocate for, simply because it is probably dominated by the large party-driven metropolitan councils. But equally, I would see in the end some form of coalition of interests that we might represent, that we might be part of, that we might lead, that we might have a range of approaches to central government. That's why I suggested a working party. And you may note I haven't proposed who should be in it. But whether we discuss that today or later, I'm not sure. It depends on how it's voted on, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think further to that, I agree. LG&Z has got a really important role in that, and I think they are carrying that out. But it's always has to be something that represents the majority of councils, and we've got some nuanced approaches I'm sure that we could take to Wellington. So it is, yeah, it's a LG&Z plus us, not us instead of LG&Z. And I also just acknowledge, essentially I wrote this because, as I was writing down all the problems, it's like quite helpful to have a solution. And I stole this one from Councillor Ryan, a suggestion that she had made. So just acknowledge the input that Rebecca had on this particular thinking. I think we are at a time and a place where this will be helpful. So that, I will put the motion. Those in favour say aye. And against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Right, on to the rest of the report. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, just a couple of very quick questions. Then on page 16, you're talking about the possibility of change with the CCO at the Maramara Airport. And the last paragraph, you in relation to that matter, in your report, you say that what could happen is just conjecture at this stage, but something for council and our communities to consider as we look to how we achieve the outcomes we want through our shareholding of OAL. So my question is, having broached it and said it's just conjecture, but then said it says something for council and community to consider, do we have a timetable for that? And if so, what do you imagine it would be?
I think it would be in the hands of staff on that one, but it would be if it was something that we could discuss as part of the LTP discussion next year, it would be, I think, the right time to do that, have that discussion. Obviously, there needs to be discussion and agreement on, that we do want to see change, but that would be, I think, the ideal timing. Mr. Palmley, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I only to say we're not doing any work on this at the moment. So if you wanted this work to be done, then you can request that. I think, I would say we've got a lot on at the moment. So I'd want to understand where this fits in terms of priorities with everything else that we're doing. We've got a lot of things to consider on the agenda today that will no doubt generate a considerable amount of work. So I just want to be clear that we can do this, but we can't do everything. If we do this, what is it? Where does it fit in the priorities, and what is it we're not going to do?
So,
Well, okay. I guess really the mayor's raised matter that there's a lot of costs and other things that are impediments. I suppose it really would be, the question for me in terms of timing would be, if you had to rank it in a order of priority, how close to the top would it be? I mean, that's surely the thing that's going to determine when we start work on it.
I think, as I say, I think it's something we need to discuss further, and as the governance team, and decide what sort of priority it does have. It's what does it fit with the vision we have. It would certainly create work in one area, but reduce work on the long term, in the long term, and certainly make the airfield more viable potentially. But we've got to weigh those things up and see whether that's something we can achieve. Okay, anything else? Did you have something else, Councillor Hopkins?
No, well, I suppose the only other question is, are we going to talk, if we are going to have a working party, when might we talk about who could be on it?
Later on. Okay. We won't tie us down right at the moment on that particular one. We're best to get some input along the way on that. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay, if someone would like to move to receive the report, Councillor Cowles, Councillor Holding, those in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. Right, and we move to 6.1, recommendation from the District Plan Review Subcommittee. Mr. Campbell and Joel Basson in the chamber with us. So hand over to Roger Cook, the Group Manager first. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Mick Coach and councillors. Yes, I'll start the introduction and hand over to Mr. Campbell and Ms. Basson. This is one of the key recommendations which has come forward from the District Plan Subcommittee. It's quite a significant departure to current direction. There's a procedure matter which needs to be resolved today if you wish to go ahead, and we'd like that done before we undertake the work, as it's a reasonable amount of work. You'll probably take it from the paper that the planning team don't necessarily support the resolution or the recommendation that's come from the district plan subcommittee. We feel this puts the heritage, which is so significant in Waitaki, at potential risk. But I'll pass over to Mr. Campbell and Ms. Basson to speak further on that.
Thank you, Chair. I guess further to that, the resolution it passed would change our entire sort of process that was sort of undertaken since 2019. And that's led to, I guess, the provisions in the plan that are yet to be proposed, plan provisions, but very much a draft, but can change, obviously. So the key is really, if council wants to adopt the resolution, we would essentially start again with the heritage items that were added since the current plan heritage schedule. So as we're flagged there, the existing people have been contacted with a bit of an unusual approach that we've consistently gone out with them and said, look, this is going to be included. Let us know if you're not happy. Now we're saying, actually, we're coming back and saying we want your express permission to include it this time round. So it would be slightly confusing for people, and very much we've gone through the process on the expectation that if they objected, then it would come out, which one or two have. So it's really just sort of about turn in process, but it will be time consuming. It'll hold up that part of the plan. We'd end up with a split schedule. We've got rollover items from the current plan and these additional ones sort of sitting in limbo. So it's kind of a potentially messy outcome. It can be done, but it would come at further cost, further time, delay, and create somewhat confusing situation for people that have already been notified more than once on these options. The other aspect too is that the Heritage Fund has been administered since that time, and some of those items that to be listed have had funding. So they've kind of been in agreement that they'd be happy to be listed. They've got some funding in their expectation that would be included. So yeah, that's just another element that comes into it. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Happy to answer any questions. Councillor Holden.
Thanks, David. I wasn't able to attend that DPR meeting, but I was watching online as time allowed. It was just from the original move in the tent. What sort of number of properties hadn't responded back then through that system? Did you have any idea of that?
In each consultation room?
Yeah, it's probably around a third or so each time around. Yeah.
I vaguely remember back in 2019 when that original resolution was made, and I think it was on the basis that we wanted to make sure that we were protecting the most important heritage items, and that they would be included, but that if anyone had opposed their particular ones, then the majority would be removed from the list. And I think personally, I think that was actually the common sense approach to the situation. If we did continue on with that, I think one of the things that does happen is that people have forgotten what may have been on the list originally, and or whatever, or forgotten they got a letter. But would we be sending out some specific letters to people when the proposed plan went out and said, your property is included on this list? This is your, if you want it removed, this is your opportunity to make your submission. Is that, it's that part there. And also, when the plan is actually approved, ultimately making sure that people are very aware of exactly what is sitting on their property or not. That goes for heritage items and through to significant natural areas and so forth. Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. I guess with the proposed plan, there's a formal RMA notice goes out to all landowners affected. We can, without trying to cause confusion, also send those landowners with the heritage item that would be subject to this another letter alongside that, so they're aware that there's kind of two things. But we've got that list already, so that could go out saying, yeah, please submit if you still don't want it in there. There's only sort of a handful last time around that asked to be removed, so it is a little bit more to the process at that stage, but there's something that can be added to just give them a warning. We just don't want to get in a position where we're notifying people very specifically on lots of different things, but this one is it's a wee bit different in that sense.
Yeah, I just know how much staff time is taken up in prosecutions, and if we can avoid one prosecution, you know, sending out a few hundred letters in this situation might be small price to pay, relatively speaking. Councillor Hopkins, you've moved the original resolution. I think you've moved the this latest one for the DPR. Do you want to speak to that at the moment?
Well, yes, I do. If I was ever asked to give a piece of advice to newly elected councillors about how to assess reports from officers, I would say a really good report actually always presents arguments on both sides, or always presents arguments for and against. There are two reports today that do neither. I would prefer, I like the planning people, I love talking to them, I love having debates with them. I would have preferred them simply to have said, I think you're an idiot and you're wrong. Because basically that's what they're saying. And they've constructed a whole series of, in my view, needless complexities to justify an argument that is essentially a subjective matter of opinion. The timeframe implications discussed on page 24, I think it's just overstating the case very substantially. No one is asking the planning department to go through the exercise of obtaining written permissions or anything else. You will know now who said yes and who said no. And frankly, I don't care if they've said yes verbally or in writing. You have the list. We agreed when you made the point at the DPR subcommittee meeting, we agreed to leave in anything that was in the proposed plan on the basis that people could have made a fuss about it and didn't. My view is that there are one or two very significant buildings that may be adversely affected here. And the one that would concern me most was Kuraheka, which I believe is a building in an estate of national, indeed international significance, and undervalued in terms of us and the New Zealand at large, New Zealand Inc. I also think, actually, I'm quite relieved if we get Sumpter Wharf out of the list at the moment, because we, the council, don't particularly want it in. That, in fact, is going to be a long-term benefit to the community, because if it is listed, there are real implications for what we do with it and how much we have to spend on it subsequently. And I suppose finally, I would just say, in this context, it looks as though on page 23, there are 17 items certainly listed as category 1, or category A, I should say. We're not told, well, there are a number. Kuraheka, Victoria Home for the Aged and Incurables, and Sumpter Wharf appear to be at the moment in the list, but without owners' consent. If they have to come out, so be it, in my view. The 2019 resolution was a compromise. I think there was a mood around the council table at the time to say owners' permission in, owners' opposition out, but the exceptional assessment wasn't incorporated as a compromise, and it was the only way of getting that across the line. My view is that officers can submit, if they do believe a particular property is of exceptional value, they can submit accordingly when the plan is notified. It's perfectly possible for them to do that. It's perfectly possible for the heritage our heritage advocate to do that. And quite possibly have the property included at that time on that basis. And it just finally, I think the suggestion heads in the direction of travel that Parliament is clear, or government is clearly intending to go. I don't know if any of you have read Mr. Bishop's speech to the Planning Institute last Friday, but it concludes with this sentence: our new regime will have the enjoyment of property rights as its guiding principle. And this is what he's talking about with regard to RMA reform. Our new regime will have the enjoyment of property rights as its guiding principle. And this is simply an acknowledgement of that. And I think there is a paradigm shift in the planning world that basically I think people are going to have to actually accept and adapt to, because I see no sign that it's going to change. And indeed, I think it's a pendulum that's turning back in the right direction. This is a very small example of that paradigm shift. And for that reason, I think the resolutions from the DPR subcommittee could stand, should stand, and I don't see them as being a fundamental violation of the resolutions in 2019.
Are you happy to move the recommendation from the DPR subcommittee?
Well, if you want me to, I personally would have preferred that they would have been moved as part of the portmanteau or umbrella recommendations when they come from the DPR subcommittee. But if you believe they should be put now, then I'm more than happy to. I'm more than happy to move that the recommendation number 1. I'll move recommendation 1. I'll move recommendation 2. I think we've addressed. I don't think we need to move recommendation 3. And in addition to 1 and 2, I will further move that the council removes any property currently listed in Schedule 2, etc. That's DPR SC 2023-063 and DPR SC 2023-064. So I'm moving 1 and 2 of today's agenda and moving the 2 DPR SC resolutions on page 22 of our agenda.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor McCone. All right, speakers to the motion. Councillor McCone.
I'd just like to make the comment that I agree with the title of what Councillor Hopkins has been saying, and the whole basis for me is that the resolutions that are there are 5 years old and things have changed and changed very quickly. And secondly, we're starting to impinge on people's property rights. Those people own the property, and if they don't want to do that, that's up to them, because the rest of it can be protected under other laws that are sitting there as well. So I don't think we should be that restrictive on what's happening.
Councillor Hopkins, bearing in mind you've
Yeah,
spoken a lot to it already.
I'm just, all I will say is this: I would ask the Chief Executive to please ensure that the suggested delay of 4 to 5 months that may, according to this report, be a consequence of proving of the recommendations that are now in front of us. I would ask the Chief Executive to ensure that that is not the case, because I do not believe it has to be.
Right reply.
The work will take as long as it takes, Councillor Hopkins. That's the advice from officers in terms of how long they believe it will take to go through that process. And I think you need to bear that in mind, that that is the advice of officers. I think, yeah, whilst in the right reply, other comments on, the policy direction of this government, may change things in terms of the RMA, but it hasn't changed things yet, as the government found out last week when its pronouncements on policy direction were ruled as unlawful and they had to retract them. So until the law changes, we have to work with what the law says we have to do at the moment, which at the moment the RMA, and it's set out in there, requires us to protect historic heritage from appropriate subdivision use and development. It doesn't say that we need permission to do that. It says we have a duty to do that, and we need to be cognizant of that. We have to fulfil, our obligations under the law as it stands at the moment. If we think the policy direction is changing, we may wish to pause and wait to see when that is about to change. There are risks to that in terms of the district plan, but I think, we're in danger of not complying with the law as it stands at the moment in terms of what we've got to do. If we think it's going to change, a pause might be necessary to avoid having to redo work. This district plan process is very costly. We know we're up against it in terms of trying to keep our costs down at the moment. But at this stage, we seem to be just constantly adding to the cost and the time frame by getting rework done. The advice of the officers, I think, stands in terms of their understanding of what's being required and their estimate. We will always try and keep the cost and the time frame down, but we have to do the work required to fulfil the wishes of this council.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor Kitcher. Just a clarification around timeframes. I mean, we could ask people to give consent within a week, or we could ask them to give consent within a month or 2 months. So just in light of what sort of reasonable timeframe you'd expect owners to get back to us, if they don't get back to us, what does that mean in terms of by consent or not?
Just a quick question while you're there. Do we have clarification on what the implications are, what the rules will be if they are on our list? As in what the requirements will be if they're on the list versus if they're not on the list?
If they're on the list and the plan is notified, that would kick in straight away in terms of protection of those buildings. It would still allow them to do basic maintenance, repairs, that type of thing. There's different sort of consents get triggered for alterations, obviously demolition, that type of thing. So they can still live in them, maintain them, that type of thing, be eligible for heritage funding as well.
Thank you. Councillor Percival.
Yeah, I'd just like to support Councillor Hopkins and McCone in their comments, and I'd make my own comment is that it's just one facet of our determination to reinforce the rights of ownership across the whole DP. So as can be seen, I seconded the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have remained silent in this conversation because as chair, I didn't want to feel like I was directing the conversation, but the feeling that I have picked up in chairing this subcommittee is that this particular issue is symptomatic of a major flaw right throughout our district plan, in that we have not been as good in the engagement space as we would desire to be. And this resolution was a consequence of that, I believe, and could have implications for other issues that the subcommittee will consider. That is not a criticism of staff. It is simply, as we've reflected on what's been put in front of us, we have concerns that our engagement process could have been done better.
Thank you. Councillor Cowles.
I guess in my mind, looking at this, it encourages closed loop communication. It ensures that the people who are notified we're getting something back and they have heard, and we do know that they've read the letters. We've heard across many times oh no, I haven't seen anything, or I haven't read anything type things. I guess for me, closed loop communication is a really important factor through some of these quite, I guess the topics that have deep effect on some people. So that would be my only comment there. I see this an advantage.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, I'm going to put it, those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Those against? That's carried. Just add, I think putting a time frame on people being able to get back to us would be helpful in making sure that this runs in parallel to the timing that we're already doing. If that can happen, that would put, make it more finite at least. And I think, speaking to Councillor Thompson's comments around communications, I think we have suffered from, too many staff leaving and new people coming in, and the whole disrupted process along the way. And I think that's just been the way it is, and it's unfortunate that it's happened like that. But we take that on board, and hence my question about how we do communicate in particular circumstances. I think in this case, it's getting letters out to those people that we do have properties listed or proposed to go on the list. I think if they're existing ones, I don't think they need asked again, but it's the new ones that are proposed and that haven't responded. And I just note, Councillor Hopkins' comments around the people who have said verbally, we know you can't take that because they might have said verbally to someone who's not even here anymore, and it may or may not be recorded, but it's, you need to do what you need to do as far as that goes. So I'll just say that to staff. Mr. Cook, and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Just to clarify, so if properties are already on the list, they remain on the list. I'm just confused how that returns property rights to the individuals if they're being kept on the list, whereas new people on the list get a different tier of service.
The existing ones on the list. Yeah, I mean, the stuff's older, so probably still relevant to be on the list, but I'll leave. Councillor Hopkins, your thoughts on that?
Well, it's perfectly simple. There was a proposed plan. We have an operative plan. There was a list of buildings that was included for consideration in that. There was a whole process. The formal RMA process has gone through. When officers raised the matter of what to do with the listings, with the buildings that were rollovers from the proposed plan, it seemed to me entirely appropriate to accept that people had had a full and thorough opportunity to register consent or opposition if they had it, and silence in that matter it is perfectly legitimate to interpret silence in that, I believe, to interpret silence in that context as consent. So the focus then shifted to those buildings that have been added to the list subsequently, and the decision, the intention of the resolution that I moved was that any of those buildings, the new ones that didn't have consent from approval of owners, came off, and we could submit to them. And we've got the opportunity under the 2019 recommendation that if it is of exceptional value, as applying the HNZ principles, officers themselves can submit on that as part of the plan. So I'm completely comfortable with this, and it isn't as problematic as it's being made out to be, in my view.
I think if there's any need for clarification along the way, happy that you speak with the chair or myself, perhaps. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through you, a question to Mr. Campbell. Would it assist you if governance gave you a recommendation today in terms of if we said that when the letters go out, council requires a response within 21 or 28 days, would that assist your process?
Yes, I think we need to factor in that the work getting through the District Plan Review Committee is still carrying on, so there is time to get a response, but then it might delay when we take it to council, depending on how much time we give people to respond this letter. So, yeah, any guidance on that would be useful.
To that effect then, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move that from the date of the letter, landowners have 21 days to respond.
Okay. That's 21 working days or 21, just make sure we're speaking in local government speak. Is it 21 days, calendar days? So, thank you. Okay, moving to those in favour, please say aye. Against, that's carried. Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to ask we jump forward. We've got morning tea very shortly, so we'll go to one that's possibly a wee bit going to be a wee bit faster, and that's the adoption of the dangerous, affected and sanitary buildings statement of proposal. And we've got Josh Dooley here for that, page 216. So we'll just give people a moment to get to that page. 6.5, yeah. Right, and hand over to Mandy and Josh.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Yes, essentially this is just a formality that we need to go through here. The dangerous and affected and sanitary buildings policy was considered by council. It presented the changes that were being proposed to that in December, on the 12th of December meeting, 2023. This particular policy needs to be reviewed every 5 years, and that was that review started in last year, and this, as I said, was presented to council on the 12th of December. And this is now part of that requirement for any change to that proposal. Under the Building Act requires that it goes through a special consultative procedure in order for those changes to that policy to be adopted and agreed. So this is really just the formality to what we brought here is just the statement of proposal, and because it's just such a minor change to that policy, which is actually just making it fit with the latest legislation that was introduced in 2019. The last policy was introduced in 2018. This is a catch-up to legislation. And so we've just made the one change to that policy, and just some small grammatical changes that were identified at that last council meeting have been introduced to that policy and identified. So what we've just done is basically a very simple statement of proposal that's required under that special consultative procedure, and just identifies the changes that have been proposed and just allows for that feedback from the community to be able to make any comment to those changes. The reason why we're planning on doing that engagement now is to align it with the annual plan consultation, which ensures more cost efficiency and also the widest reach of that feedback available. So yeah, if there's any questions or any comments, please fire away.
Okay, questions, councillors? Okay, we'll go straight to moving. Councillor Kells, seconded to Councillor McCone. Any comments? There are none. I will put it. Those in favour of this, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Josh. Appreciate that. What a good job. Okay, we'll now break for morning tea, and I believe after morning tea we have got the three of our council control organisations giving their half-year reports. So that will take us through to 11:15. So we're looking at getting on to the annual plan and water topic after that. So with that, we'll adjourn. Thanks very much.
Are you ready, sir? Okay, welcome back, Tēnā koutou katoa, and a warm welcome to the team from Whitestone Contracting. Just apologies from Mayor Gary Kuchar, just for about 10 minutes as he completes another commitment, and he'll be back soon. So you've got me in this seat in the meantime. So yeah, welcome and thank you. And I understand that you have a half-year report to present to us.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. The 6 monthly accounts have been circulated. I'll just make a couple of points through these. That the Whitestone Contracting for the 6 months recorded a profit of some 525,000 for the year. Sorry, for the 6 months, comparing to a profit of 285,000 for the previous period. The company's forward outlook for the 6 months to June 2024 is positive, and we're looking for a lot more work, which we're anticipating will come through in the needed increase in spending in infrastructure projects. Work has occurred on a number of projects, including the Kakanui water main replacement, starting the Mill Creek flood mitigation works on State Highway 1 at Mahino. The Central Otago team has completed the Lake Mackay subdivision and continues to deliver landscaping projects at Hanley's Farm and the Hanley's Farm Community Gardens and the landscaping around the Farm Cafe. The company has a variety of maintenance contracts in the Waitaki, the Mackenzie, Central Otago and the Dunedin City, now making up around 47% of the company's revenue. So there's a good mix of maintenance and construction work being undertaken. The company continues to replace and purchase new plant to support its operation, and in the 6 months, 1.1 million has been spent, including the installation of a static bitumen tank to feed the asphalt plant that is located in Milner's Quarry. The company places a high importance on health and safety and has reported no lost time injuries during the period, and there has been no serious harm incidents during that period also. Our people are important to us, and we've continued to focus this year on employee wellbeing, ensuring we have well-supported staff. Examples include a wellness survey, free flu jabs, full health checks, and a significant investment in training across the board, as well as the company being a partner with Mates in Construction, with a view to ensuring our staff remain well supported through difficult times. In short, the company is progressing well towards its target for the year and is much improved on the prior year. Our support for the community includes sponsorship both of the Whitestone Contracting Stadium and the Oamaru Opera House, as well as several smaller projects totaling some $44,000 in the year to date. The company continues to invest in upskilling our people, and we've spent in excess of $200,000 on training for the 6 months. Distributions since inception have now totaled over $10 million back into the local community, and we can confirm there was a $200,000 dividend to pay relating to the previous financial year, which will be released to the council next month. We're proud of our contribution we make to the local community and meeting the shareholders' objectives of a prosperous district, strong communities, quality services, and a valued environment. We'd also encourage you to look us up on Facebook, and you can keep up to date with what's happening around our Whitestone Contracting family. In relation to our statement of intent, we have provided that as well for the next 12 months. There was no real change from any prior years, and we continue to strive to achieve the shareholder objectives that we set out for us. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from around the table? Yes, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you for this. Just looking at the first 6 months do look promising, and you ought to be congratulated for that. I'm trying to work out, if we look at the figures on page 265, is the figure for June 2023, that's the 26 million, etc., OPEX, so are those figures for a 12-month? So for the 12-month period ending in June 2023, the total the total profit was 711,476. This time you're looking, well, if we simply double 574,869, are you anticipating over $1 million for the annual figure at the end of the year? And the other question is, can you explain to me on that page why it is that we appear to be paying more taxation on a profit of 481,163 than we did on a profit of 547,374?
Thank you. Yes, the figures for June 2023 are 12 months, and we are anticipating being able to post a bottom line surplus in excess of $1 million for this year, based on the remaining work we've got till June 2024. And in terms of taxation, that goes into the dark arts of deferred tax and movements around. And so those figures are in fact a combination of a number of calculations, councillor, in terms of deferred tax and actual tax for the current year.
May I ask one other question? I do have a couple of questions with regard to the statement of intent, or the draft statement of intent. But could I perhaps just ask, I'm curious, we don't at this stage, or we do have a rating committee, but we haven't as yet had a meeting of it. But there has been discussion around the council table of some of the work done in Oamaru. Are we to understand that the road work you've done in Humber Street, Wandsbeck, Tyne Street is completed? Or is there more work to be done and in Reed Street as well? Or is that sort of patchwork approach that's been taken to date, is that the end of the work?
Can you hear me, Jim? Look, the operational side of it is something that can be dealt with through the operational meetings. I believe, I know our programming so far is working to target on our local contracts. So I'm sorry, that's all the information I've got on that at the moment.
No, thank you for that, Paul. I understand Councillor Thompson has a question.
Part of our aims and objectives is requiring Whitestone Contracting to return 8% to the shareholder. I'd just like your comments on whether this is actually realistic, or we're living in cuckoo land when all the research I've done in the contracting space is that 2.5% return on roading contracts is considered a profitable outcome for contractors. So are we unrealistically asking you to compete in that space by saying that we want, as a shareholder, an 8% return?
Thank you, Jim. 8% is tricky. It is a target, but at the end of the day, I think over the last 12 years, I think we've only had 5 of those that haven't achieved 8%, and that includes the biggest pandemic we've had in 100 years and the highest inflation we've had in 40. So yes, there are some challenges there. The last 3 years haven't been great because of the issues around inflation and the pandemic. This year we're tracking on target for that, but are you being realistic? It's achievable. There are things that can influence that in the contracting world, weather events, inflation, etc. But yeah, it's certainly achievable, but not easily.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to tease out here is that requirement of council as the shareholder actually an impediment to some of the work that you would be chasing? Potentially our requirement on return on capital is 3 times where the contracting industry say they're working. Could that requirement preclude you from getting work because you need to seek that higher return?
Good question. Depends who your competitors are, Jim, at the end of the day, and the markets that we operate in. We operate in a market where we compete against nationwide contractors, and some of those aren't going too good either. Down to some of our smaller contractors that are owner operators. 8% a tricky number, but we are doing a lot of work going forward to improve the way the company's structured to get a better return on that, on our assets. And I think it's achievable.
I think also that a lot of it can be mitigated with our mix of work as well. And if the roading contracts are at a slightly lesser margin, that is offset by that only being around about 47% of our turnover, we can hopefully pick up better margins on some of the other work that we undertake. So it's a goal we try to achieve.
I just, if I could use a comparison, it's like, my concern is we're asking someone to compete in the 100 metres, but we're going to put a set of hobbles on you. Does that make for the outcome that we desire? I don't expect an answer, but I believe it's something we need to tease out.
Thank you for that, councillor Thompson. Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, picking up on that and probably moving very quickly to the two questions I had with regard to the draft statement of intent. There are a couple of typos in there. Do I pass those on to Paul or to? Okay, is that to you, Paul, is it? Not to them, okay, right. Okay. On page 289, you're talking about how much, what the ROI and the return on investment is and so on. One of your intentions is to maintain a diversified portfolio of working clients to ensure continuity of returns. You also say on page 292 that your plan is to grow turnover to between 30 to 35 million in the next 3 years. The last full financial year we've got, you're at 26. So, I mean, basically within 3 years, you've got to generate somewhere between 4 and 9 million more dollars by your own draft statement of intent, and you've got to diversify. And yet at the moment, it looks as though you're more dependent on us than you have been for quite some time. And I wonder if you think either or both of those things are actually achievable.
Thank you, Jim. The diversification side of it is really around risk. We're into surfacing, road construction, road maintenance, three waters maintenance, three waters construction, landscaping, vegetation control. Several elements can affect either one, whether it's a dry season can really affect our vegetation works, and likewise a wet season can as well, and construction work. And as we've seen with the three waters market, if we were 100% into three waters, the company wouldn't be in a good state at the moment until matters get sorted out. The growth side of it, this year we're on target for 28.5 million, so that's a growth of 2.5 million over the last year. And I think we're budgeting, looking forward for around 30 million next year. So it is achievable. It's not going to be easy, but we are pushing ourselves to both achieve that 30 to 35 million over the next 3 years and return 8%. I think as far as relying on the council work, yes, we do have a lot of work with the council. It's only about 30% at the moment, which isn't a bad space to be. We're carrying out a decent sized project down in Mahino, which I'm sure many of you have been through and been slightly frustrated at the delays, but just look at the lovely grader and stuff sitting on the side of the road. But look, so we've got to diversify, and we do diversify into different clients, including other local authorities and central government.
Thank you for that. I might take a final question, I think, from councillor Percival.
Yeah, I just think the way the market is, you chaps have done an incredible job to get where you're at. I think it's amazing when you think of what's out there, and when you see Higgins and all these other operators from up north and around the place coming down here. And I think that you mentioned you have a positive outlook, and keep that positivity. I'm sure it's going to be successful, but it's fairly difficult out there, and I don't think people realise how well you've actually done. Thank you.
Thank you for that positive comment, councillor Percival. Any other comments you'd like to make while you're here before we wrap up this part?
I do believe we do have a shareholder meeting coming up in the next 2 weeks, so maybe we can thresh out some of those questions then.
Sounds like a good plan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just,
Yep.
yeah, just acknowledging that we receive, your reports and things today. And we'll formally ratify them once we work through all of the CCOs that are in this morning. So thank you very much for your time.
The Victor O'Reilly is now coming in on that.
Okay, and we also have the Director Clive that's online, that's ready to join us.
Good morning, Director Geddes. It's Ainsley here, Governance Advisor.
Good morning.
Thank you. The Chair will now address you as part of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. We're just all here and I'm just sitting in the seat until the Mayor returns, but yeah, warm welcome and we can pass it over to you to present your report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the agenda item is in two pieces. Firstly, the 6-month report and then the draft statement of intent. So I'll deal with the 6-month report first and then take any questions that councillors may have in regards to the draft statement of intent. The first 6 months of the year did not live up to the expectation that we had in September last year. We anticipated a higher level of activity from visiting overseas pilots than actually eventuated. So you will note that the revenue from landing fees was down a bit on budget, but excuse me, it was made up for in terms of comparing gross profits or gross revenues for the period by some increases in other parts of the revenue stream. Our costs were very much were much below what we anticipated, in particular the repairs and maintenance, which is largely a reflection of the replacement of plant that occurred in October, November last year. So it's not been it wasn't a particularly easy 6 months, but since Christmas, the levels of activity have continued, and we don't think there is any reason why in the 12-month period the company should not trade according to the 12-month budget. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Hopkins.
Clive, thank you very much for this. I just have one, if you could. I know your notes at the very start of your report to us point out that the discrepancy between the budgeted and actual insurance costs is a matter of timing.
Yeah.
And the insurance costs on the next page have jumped double. They were budgeted 4.5 and actual 9,085. Can you I'm just trying to get my head around how was that a matter of timing? It's not, you're not being stung with much higher insurance charges as a lot of other people are. Is that correct?
No, but what happens, Councillor Hopkins, is we recover a proportion of those insurance costs from other parties for whom we pay on behalf of. And it's the timing of that recovery that has led to that the apparent cost being doubled.
Hi, Clive.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm back in the room, so just taking over. Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Halalele, for looking after things while I wasn't here. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Right. Well, I just need to check on where we're up to, but if we statement of intent.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So the statement of intent is very much a ditto repeat, because as you appreciate, the the scope of the company's activities are pretty constrained, and it is very much in the business of doing this year what we did last year and the year before, with one or two minor exceptions. So the draft is produced for your consideration, and we expect that we will get a letter of expectation back from council as a response to this draft. But Your Worship, I'm very happy to take any questions that yourself, councillors or executive may have in regards to the draft.
Thank you. So councillors, any comments on that? We're all looking very studious. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clive, I just wonder if you could give us a brief painted picture of how the subdivision is progressing.
Okay, thank you. The subdivision, all of the civil works on the subdivision have been completed, and a practical certificate of completion has been issued to the contractor, with the usual retentions retained for the 12-month period against any unexpected events. We are, excuse me, we are now in a position where we have we've commenced marketing. We've got one lot in an unconditional contract and two others under negotiation. And we have all the background documentation in regards to the mortgage from the council now completed, and that will be filed in the next few days. We are anticipating being able to apply for 224C release in the next 2-week period, and that will be in part subject to signing off the agreement in regards to the treatment of financial contributions.
Thank you. Councillors, anything else? No, I think if there is anything further on the statement of intent, Clive will get that to you, but
yep.
Nothing at the moment.
Great, thank you. I just want to pass on again to council, Your Worship, the appreciation the company has of the council support that it has received over the past 12 months. And that really is appreciated, because in effect what it does is it secures the airport as an entity for the foreseeable future, and just as importantly secures the shareholders from any potential demand for shareholder contributions to future costs. And we really appreciate the council's positive attitude to that position.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all the directors for the good work that they do for a very reasonable fee of zero. Always worth noting that you are volunteering your time, and that is appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we now have moved on to Tourism Waitaki, and welcome Philip Agnew, General Manager, and we've got 3 of the board members with us today, including the Chair, Mike McElhinney. So, welcome.
Good morning.
We'll just hand straight to you, Mike.
Yeah, Kia ora, good morning, thank you. We've got the 6-month report there, which I'm sure you've had a chance to have a look at, but just in terms of overview, it's been a very good season for us in terms of the tourist market. We've done very, very well as a district, with the numbers growing in visitations and in the length of stay, which is ticking a lot of good boxes for us. And Dr. Phillip is smiling nicely as the numbers for the penguin colony have increased quite dramatically, better than forecasted for us, as the tourist market recovered back as well, and you'll see quite a strong domestic Kiwi market there as well. So all in all, as a company, we're in a pretty good sort of a position. So on the report. Very happy to take any questions around that at this stage.
Right, sorry, separate conversation going on. Councillor Holding.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and congratulations on a good result. I'm just curious what sort of improvements you'll be undertaking on the colony building.
Yeah, so we're looking at doing a bit of a refresh of the day product and the information side of it. So we did a little bit of work about 6 years ago, but what we're wanting to do is really step that up in terms of turning it into a more of an interactive display. So we've got a lot of good information there. It's just not very interactive. So we're discussing with a company called Locals to do that, and they've got a lot of experience in that space they've worked with Te Papa and some really neat stuff. So that's what we want to turn it into, is just really lift it in terms of its offering.
It's a matter of starting to future-proof it as we go forward. You know, we can't let it sit there. So we're the board have quite an investment in developing this offering and seeing it grow and develop.
Okay. Anything else, councillors? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kitcher. Yes, good numbers on page 309 and the graph on page 310. And it looks to me as though this year is the best since 2019. So that really is encouraging. I do have one question on page 314. You're talking about the marketing plan that you produced for 2023-24 and how you had travel through time and so on, discover the wonders of Waitaki. You ran the campaign through NZME across several digital platforms. The overall result was over 7 million impressions, 35,000 clicks. But the real question I have is, how many actual visitors did the campaign deliver? I mean, clicks are fine, but who actually spent some money coming here and staying here and doing things here?
Marketers don't like that question very much. The reality for that one is it's very hard to then go through and find out the people that actually came in, because if you saw or heard a radio campaign in April, then you might not visit the region until the following April, but you went there as a result of that campaign. So it is a difficult one. So we do have to go on impressions and click-throughs to find out, because we're the awareness, that's measuring the awareness. What we can do is in future we might look to do something like partner with an airline and have a and I say that with my airport hat on as well, but it might be that we put a ticket price on there, and that enables us to measure the number of people that flew into Dunedin and then maybe picked up a rental and went to Waitaki. So it is a hard one, councillor, to try and measure, but the awareness, it's a very good measurement from an awareness point of view that people know about the Waitaki.
Thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Not really a question, just more feedback. I just think the marketing work that Tourism Waitaki has been doing is really great. And I've had feedback from lots of locals who, well, I guess locals who are seeing it, but the digital presence and the work that you've been doing in that space is really impressive. So well done.
Councillor Cowles.
Yeah, I guess it's more of a comment for me as well, but I'd like to echo Councillor Ryan's sentiment. Obviously, sitting in this space a little bit myself, and a person, we're seeing just huge numbers come through the region. I guess my only thing is really we're going to have to look at future proofing, particularly up the Waitaki Valley. We're going to need some growth, and that's something that we need to partner with and look at doing. But yeah, no, it's a breath of fresh air around the marketing and the campaigning that we're seeing. So thank you very much for all the hard work that's going on.
Councillor Thompson.
Ditto in terms of a pat on the back. Just some feedback. I was at the Colony on Sunday with my 3-year-old grandson, and he felt there was possibly a need to supply the seals with toothpaste.
Sorry, other conversations going on. Any other questions or comments or positive feedback? Councillor Hopkins.
Mayor Kircher, I'm happy to move the recommendations on, if you allow, on page 252. So I move 1 and 2, so 1 A, B, C, D, E, and F, and 2.
Okay, seconded, councillor Holding. Any further discussion on that? Okay, I'll put it. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And against? As carried. Thank you. Did you want to talk, do you have anything else that you want to add? Just double check. Look like you waiting to say something there, Mike.
No, really, just moving on to the look, and again, just acknowledging Dr. Philippa and the team who are very limited at the moment. You're pretty much looking at Tourism Waitaki here, and in terms of its operational, apart from the agency that we've employed at Christchurch to help us through this particular time. So moving on really to the statement of intent, if there are any questions around that, the draft statement that we've tabled, we're more than happy to answer any of those.
Any feedback, councillors? No. If anything comes up, we will let you know separately, but no, all looks fine at the moment. It's been a fairly large agenda for everyone to get their teeth into, so some of those things, there may be some thoughts later, but we'll let you know as soon as we can. But thank you very much for the work you're doing in these uncertain times. It is very good seeing the tourist spend going up and, really getting to, to really hot, good levels and, further that the events like over this last weekend, just the absolute wonderful Jazz and Blues Festival that we had, which not only was for locals, but the number of people who came here for that and the number of people who were incidentally here and found it was on, I just blown away. So yeah, anyway, keep up your good work. Thank you. Right, councillors, we'll go on to another small topic, adoption of the annual plan consultation document. Not so small. And welcome back, Mandy McIntosh, and we'll hand to Mr. Hope first and then to Mandy.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Yep. So Ms. McIntosh will go through some of the more practical aspects of the report. I really just wanted to open with a couple of brief comments. The resolution that we're presenting is very different from what we were contemplating only sort of 2 months ago. Then with the changes that the government brought through with the local water done well, and the implications that it had on the council planning process. They did allow the option to produce an enhanced annual plan rather than a long-term plan. So that was an opportunity that council decided to take advantage of in February. So what is presented is really a document that modifies year 4 of the current long-term plan rather than launching a new 10-year plan. I think given the very rapid turnaround and change in direction, I think we should all be very happy with what's been presented. Particularly want to acknowledge the work that Sonia Martinez and the comms team have done, really shifting the message very quickly, and I think coming up with a very digestible document. I was actually really encouraged by Mr. Henderson's comments in the public forum. I mean, the idea is to give information so that it really is focused on an interested ratepayer being able to ask good questions and being able to make good comments. And I think Mr. Henderson's questions, which he, as he did say, he doesn't expect to answer straight away, but at least I think the questions, were very on point and appropriate and specific enough that we can actually respond to them in a meaningful way, rather than having something very general. And so you just get a very general answer back. So that's really all from me. I think it's an engaging document, and we're really looking for a good public response for it. But over to you, Mandy.
Thank you. Councillors. Sorry, Mandy first, was it? Yep.
I don't thank you, Mr. Hope. I think you've covered a lot of everything that's there.
I thought he had.
And the report's been read, but yeah, if you want to just hand over, I guess this is an important part of the process to enable us to go out to consultation, which we have to do with that change from an annual plan from a long-term plan. We need to consult on this process. But I think, as Mr. Hope said, we've tried to make that document one that is relatable with our community, that prompts the big questions, that prompts, people to take an interest in what we are actually trying to achieve as a council for our community. I know that we've had a lot of feedback as we've gone on this process, and we've tried to take a lot of that on board. There's probably not the directness in some of the messaging we want, but to go with the consultation document that we've got here, there will also be produced a 4-page summary document that will just have the form at the back and some of those really key messaging at the front, 2 pages of that. So when we go out to a community conversation, we've got that available as well. So yeah, happy to take any question.
Okay, Councillor McCone.
I'd just like to reiterate and commend the amount of work and effort that's gone in there, and it's a document that's not in your face, it's asking for interaction. I think that's very special and needs to be pushed a bit further. And so congratulations on doing that. Just a wee grizzle though, I noticed in one of the assessments that Corridor Water is not included in its averages across what the rates rise will do to the average rate in Corridor.
Thank you. We can see whether we can include that at this late stage, but it would be quite a change to the context. We have got some changes that, as we've passed this out the agenda, there are some changes we will need to run through the CE just for grammatical and typos. But if that is wanted to be included, say so here and we'll see if we can do that.
Just seek clarification. Are these changes that are happening in this next financial year?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I do have some questions about the document. But before I ask those, can we just look at the figures we've been given on page 97 of our agenda today, where we are told how it is that we've arrived, or we're proposing to consult on a 13.73 increase. I'm not at all sure that the way this is laid out makes it clear to people. When did we decide that we would unfund, is it $500,000 worth of depreciation, and what? And I can't quite understand why it's being shown the way it is. How are we going to get this increased investment income, which appears to be more than the increased borrowing cost? Is that actually theoretically, is that actually the case? What has led the transformation team on short-term contracts, or that budget, to go up by $500,000? The increased rental income towards the bottom of the page, who's that coming from? If free parking stays as it is, then why should there be reduced car parking revenue? I mean, we know what we're getting now. If we're not changing that, and I don't believe we should, and indeed, if we're going to try and engineer a move from rates to user pays, we should perhaps consider more parking charges, but putting that aside for the moment, there's a whole lot of questions there that don't immediately make sense to me, and I'm not sure they necessarily, the way it's laid out or explained, will make much sense to members of the public trying to decode this as well. Can somebody clarify that chart and answer some of those questions, please?
Okay, I think I've got 4 of those. Unfunded. Quite simply, if council has a policy and hasn't agreed to unfund the depreciation on certain classes of assets. So if the depreciation increases on those assets, then the amount being unfunded also increases. So that's why it's tied into the line above. Plus, if an asset is brand new and we're servicing loans on it, then we don't fund the depreciation on those. So that is a existing council policy, and so that's the application of it. So, and we need to show the gross amount of the depreciation rather than the net, otherwise it complicates the financial statements. The investment income, again, this is comparing to what was projected in the annual plan. We have made a number of changes to the particularly the loan with the North Otago Irrigation Company, request of council. So that is providing a higher level of return than was originally anticipated. Plus we are getting the benefits of increased interest rates on our invested income. Rental income, the big movement there was the movement in the community housing rentals along with the normal market adjustments. So that's taken place, and there was quite an exercise in relation to that over the last 6 months. So we're seeing the full benefit of that, full benefit of that in this coming financial year. And the free parking, again, that was a matter that was, it's a change from what was proposed in the 23-24 annual plan. And I think I missed one, sorry. I mean, the challenge is, sorry, I'll leave transformation somewhere else. But I mean, this is, I suppose this is designed to prompt questions. If we went through and tried to explain absolutely every change in the budget, then we'd just have pages and pages of explanation rather than being able to respond particularly. And I think, you know, we'll look to, if questions come through, particularly through social media or other forums, then we will look to share the answers and make those public so people can get better informed about the specific items of interest.
Supplementary then, before we hear from transformation or about transformation, what the numbers and brackets therefore mean to a layperson reading this is if you add those up, they come to about $4 million in rates savings. So every bracketed figure is an amount that won't have to be rated for or funded in some way. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's about 5 million.
I did a very quick calculation.
I did a quicker one. It's 5.
Yeah. All right, Mayor, you win.
It's all right. Yeah, I just do note, you know, one of the ones which was that increased investment income, which pleasingly is greater than what the increased external borrowing cost is. So the net result of it is slightly better than break even on that part. Who would like to talk to transformation? Mrs. Bailey, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. And through the chair, I'd just like to note that, you know, when we set this budget, it was quite some time ago. The first thing I will say is we are still within our overall budget set for the transformation program. We have had to bring in short-term contracts to allow other staff to get on with their BAU so that we can actually implement some of the projects that we agreed as a result of phase 2. But I certainly can reiterate that we are still within budget. What that will mean is that we're actually spending less in our consultant spend and more internally to get the work done.
Thank you.
Councillor McCone.
Yeah, I just have a query on page 109, changes to debt. What happens? So I see we see their planned external debt. Is there a plan to cover that off?
Or I don't quite understand the question.
Well, the orange line says we planned external debt exceeds the limit. So what happens in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, these tables are just to, at this point in time, what the next 10 years would look like. And clearly, we're going to have a whole long-term plan process next year. And I mean, it's just highlighting essentially the issues the council faces and will need to be resolved through the long-term plan process, because we can't. We need to do something to make sure it stays within the limits.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
just add to that in terms of clarity. So obviously we had to recast the figures, so that includes the assumption that we retain waters for the 10 years. Now, clearly that's something we're looking at, but in terms of our financial planning, we have to plan that we've got waters going forward, because the legislation to remove waters from us has been repealed. So a lot of that debt is associated with the investment that's required in waters.
Yeah, I also had that circled, and just request that we basically have that disclaimer underneath that actually we need to work on this, and we'll do that in the long-term plan process. There's a lot of discussions around working with other councils, sharing services, that sort of thing, which around particularly around water, which will hopefully drive some efficiencies and so on. And also, there's going to be a tipping point, I think, for all councils that they're just not going to be able to meet budgets, affordable budgets, and the government will need to do something about some of the water standards that are there, or the imposition of those standards as part of that. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's something that needs to be worked on next year as part of the LTP. But in the meantime, signalling that we will do that work would be good.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, and it's really picking up on Councillor Hopkins' point that, not necessarily for the document, given the lateness now, but in terms of our communications, being able to tell the story better in terms of what we have been doing and what we continue to do in terms of keeping costs down. So obviously in our communications, looking at how we make those lines, more simple to understand, but also reminding, we had requests to sharpen our pencil, but as part of this process to get to this point, you've reduced your waters program by 41% on what was planned. You've reduced your roading spend by 19.7% on what was planned. You've reduced your parks investment by 12% on what was planned. And overall, in terms of that project space, it's a 31% reduction more than that's been undertaken there to achieve a lower rate rise. Now, clearly, it's still higher than what people want, but I think we need to tell the story of what you have done as a council to try and get that rate rise down better in our communications that we go out with.
Thank you. Just while we're on that page, the rates affordability graph shows the projected local government cost index, which I think Bill does that one. It's showing some numbers there which no council is achieving. So it indicate that they are really wrong. And so I question the value of actually having that comparison when we know that there's no council going out, I don't think, with a 4.5% rate increase. Mr. Hope, any thoughts on that?
Well, that is the affordability measure that we've got in the current long-term plans, and I agree it's a measure. How we communicate that to the community and what we judge it against is a matter that we will again need to consider through the long-term plan process and come up with something that's more meaningful and more appropriate.
Yeah, I think an acceptance of those projections are just totally out of kilter would be helpful, at least in this case. Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, through the chair, just on page 106, speaking about transformation and the plan to start sharing more information about changes and new initiatives as we talk about the annual and long-term plans. What is the plan for that information sharing? I just wonder whether it could have been an opportunity to include more in this document. We keep getting feedback that people aren't understanding transformation, and so I don't know. I'm just interested in what the plan is to start sharing more information on those changes and new initiatives as part of this.
So the original plan was to share it as part of the long-term plan document, and that was going to be the transformational long-term plan. Given that, we're now in an annual plan process, it's proposed that, that information on transformation will be as part of the engagement that we do once we get this annual plan process completed. I think there is more communication we'll want to do with our community ahead of that, but this document is really set out to start to lay the ground for that, transformation engagement that we want to do.
Okay, if I can just go through to page 116, it's talking about the fees and charges, but it's then directing people to the website to find out what's happening. It would be good to have some form of guide about what are we talking about all those fees and charges increasing. I find it a bit difficult to ask, what do you think of this, when actually I've got to go and get onto a website and find it and go from there.
Yeah, so there are a number of changes to various fees and charges across the organisation. So there's probably like even within one area, there might be a page of changes within itself because of just proposed. So we've really had to reduce the words there to fit it in. If we had to include all those fees and charges, it would probably be another sort of 6 pages added to this document. And it is, so the fees and charges on the website explains that those charges by line, by activity, because they're very specific by each activity. For example, for the planning, they've changed a number of their deposit structures, reducing a number of those deposits, eliminating a number of those deposits, just charging that actual rate. But that affects about a dozen of those lines on that sheet. So it becomes quite complicated, whereas what we've put up on the website identifies it clearly where those changes are proposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even if there is a 1-sentence summary of each one would be helpful if you can squeeze on there, but understand the space constraints, especially when you're getting some councillors wanting far fewer pages on this. Just on the page 122, talking about different ways of handling rating for water. I think it would be good to have the disclaimer on there that if you're not connected to a council supply, water or wastewater supply, you don't pay. I'm not sure if we do have any half charges anymore for availability. So yeah, whether it can be on there, so people know that actually, if they've got a septic tank, they're not going to be asked to pay for other people's wastewater system. Councillor Holden,
through the chair, just a question for Mr. Palmer. Can you just for clarification, you said about cutting, I know we've delayed some 41% of the water projects for the future, but you said about parks 12% decrease.
Yeah, so this is in the projects that you considered, the proposed projects. And so I was talking about the actual level of cost reduction that you went through to actually help reduce the rates increase. So the parks figure was originally around 19.3 million, and you reduced it to 17 million. Likewise, in water, it was originally 35.9 million that was planned to be spent next year. It's been reduced to 21.1 million. And within roading, the original figure was 14.7 million to be spent next year, and it's now 11.8 million.
Just trying to mirror to the comments on page 93, that this revised level of rates will allow for current levels of service to be maintained.
So yeah, so we're not cutting services. This is about a reduction in the investment in terms of the projects. So it might mean in some of those things a reduction in upgrades. In some areas like roading, in particular, it was a reduction in terms of the improvements in safety that was a particular area of focus. So it's not reduction in service. What it might mean is that we're delaying improvement of an asset or an improvement to service.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. Through the chair, what communication has there been with CCOs ahead of us asking whether the community would support us looking into selling all or part of the?
Just general communications. I mean, this is a matter that has been, I think, raised with them on a number of occasions. So I think that in terms of being specifically a page in this document, no.
So for clarity, we haven't formally written to them and said we're going to consult on this, but we have had discussions with them that, you know, this is something that the council wishes to consider.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, general comment later when it comes to the vote, but some questions on pages of the consultation document. I would suggest that on page 102, the sort of the proud claim, we've got the rates increased down to 13.73 average, is guaranteed to encourage snorts of derision and frustration. I would note that the first time, bearing in mind that the Mayor has said today, again, the system is broken and rates are unaffordable, the first mention of the fundamental issue in front of us appears on the 8th page, page 107 of the document. In fact, yeah, the current system is not sustainable. Central government needs to change. We're not saying we need to change. We're not saying you guys have to allow us to change because this system is broken. And it's taken 8 pages to get to the fundamental issue. Page 14, 114, I should say. We're asking, give us a steer. How do people make sense of that when there's nothing on the page that says what we actually want them to give us a steer about? Selling property, selling down, and possibly selling CCO. Why aren't these things there? If you look at page 118 and 119, the roading and other costs, how can people make sense of the roading questions we're asking them when they don't have the dollar figures of that related to the options? I just find it intensely frustrating. There's a way, the wording for the on page 122, the debate about how we fund the water thing could and should desperately needs to be expressed more simply. And on page 125, the way we are framing those questions, should we look at selling some land? What about partnership? We are just setting ourselves up to get a resounding no. The question is not should we look at, the question we need to ask is we intend to sell some. And we are looking at selling these kinds of properties in order to offset rates.
Yeah.
It is time to get there. So sorry. I just feel utterly frustrated that we say that the Mayor says, and I share his view, that the system is broken, and it takes us 8 pages to even touch on that matter. And then we just don't ask the hard questions that we need to ask to get the community to engage with us in the process of change that has to happen.
Councillor Percival.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I'd just like to pick up on Councillor McCain's discussion before. I think Corridor their rates should be made an example of, as it is the second largest population agricultural area in the district. And I think rather than having Herbert as an example of a village in Corridor, Kakanui might be a better example with its bigger population and probably the effect of the new rates will have on that. That's just my suggestions, which I think should be considered seriously. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just on the samples, there's one commercial one. Again, there's space constraint, but equally it's more informative if we can have slightly broader range, and certainly some of those, one or two other Corridale examples would be helpful. Just going to Councillor Hopkins' point, I think the question on page 102, which says, so where the heck are we, could be the introduction, because that is the question, we're asking ourselves. And I think it is, things are such a challenge at the moment. We've spent a lot of time getting down to 13.73. People need to know we're not happy that it's that. But equally, we've got all of these cost pressures and levels of service pressures that we need to meet. We're not doing exactly the same things as we did last year, and those things haven't gone up at the rate of inflation. We need to tell people that, so that they don't, well, they can at least understand the pressure and why we are doing what we're doing. So I do suggest we look at just a reordering of some pages, just to actually, make that the discussion, or certainly frame the discussion that we have further on. I know there's been a lot of toing and froing already, Mandy, on this, and you've been very good at absorbing those and reflecting them in the document. But we are facing unprecedented times, and it's good to frame it that way. Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I mean, we've had to turn this document around very quickly from the change position of going for an annual plan instead of a long-term plan. And there has been, a few opportunities to comment on drafts. And I think it'd be helpful if we've got improvements we want to make, to suggest improvements, but, venting frustrations when we're trying to all work hard to get this done in the time frame. I think, I don't see that actually helps move us forward, but suggestions of how we can improve, helpful, I think, in that context. In terms of some of the suggestions made around, listing property, this council's not agreed to sell any property. So we can't, as a set of officers, put something in a consultation document for you to approve that hasn't been through a process of agreeing what properties you want to sell. We're doing some work on the basis of the property strategy to, bring forward a suggested list, but we can't very well go out and consult on something that you haven't agreed as a council you want to do.
Ms. McIntosh.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. I just wanted to say, if you want to bring that page forward, which we introduced that page, so where the heck are we, in direct response to Councillor Hopkins' comments at the last time we discussed the draft proposal. Because I think at that meeting, Councillor Hopkins suggested that we should have a page that introduced those topics right at the front, so that everyone knew what we were going to be putting out there to the public. So we put it at page 3 because we felt that introduction was important, but really easy to move that around. If you wanted to make that, Mayor Kircher, instead we could put the, so where the heck are we, on page 100, and the introduction beside that, and then the taking stop on page following. We can make that change if that's what you wish to do.
Yeah, I think as much as it's not accurate, or there's writers to it, the paragraph, the graph page 109 in the agenda would be one that you could bring forward as well, potentially, if you need to. Got to get the pages set out right. That sort of demonstrates some of that challenge that we have. I will leave that to you. Councillor Hopkins.
I just have a question. I'm sorry, Alex, if you feel that the criticism, they were implicit in the criticism suggestions. And I've made this argument. Basically, I just wrote when I saw this, I've been wasting my breath. I'm clearly maybe a minority of one. But my view is we are in a dire circumstance, and the document does not reflect that. The local government, generally speaking, around the nation, is at a crunch point. I would compare it to the situation that the Longy Douglas government faced in 1984 when Muldoon was eventually finally kicked out of office. But I have tried to argue for a clearer sense of urgency and focus and a simple exposition of the issues and the problems and the potential solutions. And I don't think that's encapsulated in this document. I hope like hell it can be done in the summary, the 4-pager. I desperately hope it can be and should be and will be. But the other question is, if we're going to make changes, as I understand it, this thing is going to be released on the 28th, 2 days from now. It's too late to change anything now. I can't see any meaningful alterations possible at this late stage. The document is what it is and will be what it is.
Let's go to Ms McIntosh and get her thoughts on that.
It is too late to make significant change, but we can move the page forward and change that. There are, as I said, some grammatical errors and some typos that have been identified. We correct those. There's also on page 112, 113, a couple of the figures that are incorrect. We will correct those. And then on the fees and charges table, property has been omitted from that fees and charges table. So those things we can correct. Minor things we can change. And bringing a page forward is actually very simple rather than chopping and changing design on page. But we can work with that. We want this to be well received and read by our community. We wanted to present a story to them that they understand our situation completely. And sometimes limited sentence structure does not do that. They need full sentence structure to understand and fully convey the situation that we are in as we go towards the long-term plan. This is a 1-year plan as we head towards our long-term plan, setting the tone for where we'll get to in our long-term plan. But your feedback has been received, but obviously not delivered as well as you'd expected, and I apologise for that. But I feel that we've done a document here that our community will actually be able to relate to and will read, and we will generate the feedback that we are looking for, whether it be harsh, and it will be harsh, but that is what we need to hear back from our community.
Okay, Councillor Percival.
Pages 119, which is a discussion or proposals for levels of service, either reduce, maintain or improve. I find that a little bit confusing because in those areas we have contractors which have tendered for the maintenance work within those three the departments, as in roading, water and parks. Their tender prices are put forward with the appreciation of inflation and incurred costs and unknown. So how can that be such an issue in here when the level of service will be maintained under those contractual agreements with those contractors? So the only way we could change anything with that is to dictate to them that they don't do this, and it then affects, and it cannot affect, their tendered price. So I don't understand how that you've got that all together in such a debate with it.
Councillor Percival, bearing in mind that that's a topic that we're putting out there for the 25 to 34 long-term plan levels of service. So a lot of those contracts are due for review as we go through them. Most of those contracts are 5 years, so we might not be able to change them immediately, but as we go through those terms of those contracts, as they come up, we need to consider what is needed for our community and where is our ability to change those cost structures as we go forward. So it's not something that we can do tomorrow. It's something that we can do as we go through that.
Paul, you want to talk about variations to contract?
Well, yeah, all of the contracts have certainly a fixed component to it, but all of them also have a variable component to them. And and it is just a matter of negotiation. And that was signalled because we knew we were looking at this. It was certainly well signalled in both the roading contract and during the parks tender process that there needed to be a mechanism to adjust levels of service to basically reflect council's affordability. So the contractors understand that, and and agreed. We can't just arbitrarily cut something, but it is a matter of negotiation, and there are mechanisms allowed for in the contracts for that to happen to basically the satisfaction of both parties.
Councillor Cowles.
I suppose it's more of a comment, but you know, I've sort of said about the keeping it simple and stuff like that, and I'd like to congratulate you on that. The last annual plan document that I read, there was areas there that I struggled. You know, I've learned an awful lot from being on this side of a table now. But this year, you know, just bearing in mind that not everyone has the knowledge that we have, I think it will bring out some good engagement, and I think it will ask some questions. We're never going to get answers to everything that we need, but we've got to try and provoke some good engagement. A lot of this here is easy to read and easy to understand, and I think that information, I would very much congratulate you on having that there.
Thank you. I do have a few other bits and pieces, minor bits, so they'll be included in the minor edit category. But I'll pass them on separately and make sure that I do today. Councillor Hopkins.
I want to ask a question about an unrelated, well, two other questions. One perhaps to Mr. Palmley and one perhaps to Mandy. Ms. McIntosh, there's a reference on page 136 to various videos that apparently were meant to be produced in mid-March. There's a reference to those information videos coming out on the 19th, and there's a further reference to videos on the next page again, going live in March. Have any of those been shot? Because I don't think any of those have been shown to us. Are we going to see them if indeed they are being shot or have been shot? And the question I have, Mr. Palmley, on page 134, it says, I think unfortunately, that our 2024 annual plan will likely build the tone and theme for the long-term plan. As I've indicated, I think this is not the time for lightly building anything. But it goes on to say that the long-term plan generally sets the theme for the next 2 years, which is why the intention is to likely introduce the fit for the future through the back end of the consultation document. I'm just wondering, Mr. Palmley, if you think it might be too early to decide what next year's theme should be. And perhaps it might help to get the community's feedback on the extended annual plan before we lock into place a fit for the future theme on a long-term plan that we haven't even written yet.
Can I just say, we've got half an hour left for what is supposed to be the public part of the meeting. There's no way we're going to get through everything that we've got. We're going to have to rearrange a whole lot of stuff. So perhaps that's a discussion for another time. But at the moment, we had agreed what was going to be in the long-term plan, what the theme was going to be. We agreed that we would adjust that. I'm not going to use the word pivot. We would adjust that, and we've done that, and we've had the opportunity for having the say on that was really a while ago when we had briefing on that. But anyway, that's where we're at, and I think we need to get on with the adoption of this, and yeah, make sure that we've got as much time as we have for the other items. So does someone, Councillor Cowles, you willing to move that? Councillor McCone, second that. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Just a question, Mayor Kircher. Are you willing, or do you intend to put all the motion resolutions together or separately?
So, I'm just going back to that page so I can see what makes sense. Is there anything that you would think needs to be separated out?
Well, I personally would not be, I'm not willing to approve the 2024 annual plan engagement document, even with minor edits. So I would vote no on 5 and probably yes on everything else.
Okay, we will go with 1 through 9, except 5. So those in favour of those, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that is carried. And item 5, the approval of the 2024-25 annual plan engagement document subject to any minor edits. I'd suggest that that's agreed at this meeting or passed on to Mandy for review after the meeting. So with that understanding, I guess, those in favour of that, please say aye.
Aye.
And against?
No.
That is carried.
No, my vote is against, please.
I will ask, it's too late to do anything in this process, but it's something I've asked for before. And I'd move that further clause number 10 that requests that the detailed financial accounts are provided to the governance team to help identify further savings in parallel with the engagement process. So can I get a second, Councillor Hopkins? Reason for this is we've asked about the business as usual a number of times. We haven't had, I think, sufficient responses to that. I have asked for these accounts, not formally, but I'm doing that formally now so that we have an understanding of some of the core costs to council, because we're not seeing some of those things to any real degree, and that's what I'm asking for with this, Mr. Palmer.
Just seeking clarification of when you say detailed. I mean, we have provided the accounts set out in terms of, personnel costs, other operating costs, that level previously. Are you looking for a detailed breakdown of each expenditure item within that area? What level of detail below that you've received are you seeking? Just clarification.
I think it's getting clarity across a number of activities. Happy to work with staff on exactly what level that might go down to. But yeah, it's getting a better understanding of some of the underlying costs that we have, the overheads that get allocated and how they get allocated, and on the basis of full transparency and actually working as a team so that we've got the information and can look at the sufficient detail to look at where things might be able to be changed around at sometime at least. Councillor Hopkins. So any questions or comments to the motion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? It's carried. Thank you. Right, moving on to the revenue and financing policy. So we've had a session on this, and one of the changes is really looking at just making some change amendments to make sure that the rating policy is as fair as possible. And I'll hand over to Mr. Hope to get into whatever detail he wants to.
Which would be very little. This was basically just reflects the decisions that were made at a council meeting 2 weeks ago. So hopefully that's about all you need.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Mayor Kitcher, your point about the time available to us was one that occurred to me just going through all this material over the weekend. There are a number of sort of very minor little things about the wording and explanations in the revenue and finance policy. I do notice that we don't have a deadline like the March 28 one for the summary document we just voted on. So I'm wondering if the simplest solution to this is for us to actually ask comments to Mr. Hope for inclusion or modification as he sees fit. I personally think it's just a more efficient use of time than going through them here today.
Is the time frame the same?
Yep, so it need to be today.
Okay. So Mandy,
sorry, it can be passed across today. Doesn't need to be done in the meeting today. If it is only minor wording changes.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? All right, someone like to move the recommendations? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Councillor Hopkins?
No.
Okay, seconding Councillor McCone. All right, question from you, Councillor Hopkins.
Well, again, I do not see why we have to ram this out on Friday when there is no date in front of us here in this recommendation. If we want to get these things right, then we could resolve to release these documents for consultation in a week's time. But equally, with regard to the funding needs analysis and the remissions policy, there's a few things that I just think would be better changed. So as long as we get some chance to feed those into the process, because this is the first time I've actually seen that document in total detail, 2 days before it's due to go out. So how we can possibly be expected to make a meaningful contribution if we think there is a need for change is difficult to understand.
It was available in the agenda last week.
Well,
Whatever day that was when it was published. Of course, not everyone gets to read it straight away. Ms.
And I just wanted to make note that the consultation period, the agreement to consult at this council meeting and consultation period is also stated on page 140, being consultation from the 28th of March to the 30th of April, running in parallel with the annual plan at the same time as the dangerous and sanitary building for efficiency of reach and for effectiveness of consultation to ensure that we are not spending more money in consultation unnecessarily.
Councillor Cowles.
Yes, thank you, Ms. McIntosh. That's what I was about to congratulate you on, is the fact that we've asked for efficiencies and for these things to become while we're kind of consulting. And if we're consulting on some of these big issues and bring this out at the same time, we have had a look at this. In my mind, it reflects what we've already passed at council. So I don't know. I just think it makes sense that we, if we're consulting, that we're bundling stuff together and trying to get as much feedback as possible at the same time. So.
Councillor McCone, you want to say something? No, you're agreeing? Okay. If there's nothing else, I'll put it. Those in favour say aye. And against, that is carried. Thank you. We move on to notice of motion from Councillor Blackler, and I understand Councillor Thompson in his absence that you've been given the responsibility of bearing this particular torch. So happy to, if you want to say anything as on behalf of Councillor Blackler at this stage, or you can go straight to Mr. Palmley.
Look, I'm happy to speak to this in that Councillor Blackler and I did have considerable discussions on this topic, and I know that Councillor Blackler has done a reasonable amount of research as he thought the most suitable process to raise this issue. It's his thoughts on the basis that this is our most major area of expenditure in council, that we should seek independent advice, not as a challenge to what the staff are doing, but as a challenge to ourselves as to what we decide is the best fit in this space. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Mr. Palmer.
So there's a question in terms of how we want to handle this procedurally. So there's obviously a report that follows this in terms of meeting the requirements under the regulations in terms of water, where I think some of these things, the intent of this notice of motion might have been considered in there. But I think for myself, understanding the full intent is important. So the recommendation one there under the notice of motion is asking me to analyse and consider an independent review into our water services. And I was unsure as to whether that was purely in regard to the management of individual supplies, or whether a full review of our water services was being requested in this, which is a fundamentally different matter. And comes in the context of a change in legislative landscape, where we've had the repeal of the affordable water legislation, and we are currently working with councils across the Otago Southland area, and also talking to councils in Canterbury about what the future might look like for water services. And it is uncertain at the moment. So any full-scale review of water services would come in the context of no legislative certainty at this stage, but also comes in the context of our transformation programme. And water services is included in transformation. We haven't excluded any services from our transformation. So I think my understanding of the intent of that and the extent of what is required in a review would be important to be able to progress that.
Councillor Thompson, do you have any response to that?
The only thing that I can, and again, speaking on my discussions with Councillor Blackler, he was very conscious of the fact that he wanted to encourage us through this process, not actually wanting to instruct council as to what would take place. But the thing that the challenge for all of us is this is our major area of spend. One of the discussions we've had is that we've been totally reliant on staff to feed back communication from Te Mana Atawai. As a governance group, we've never actually spoken or had some direction from them. And we've got some major concerns around schemes that were originally set up to provide stock water that have now shifted into supplying house water. Te Mana Atawai met with the Clutha District Council and made some noises that there was room to manoeuvre, but we've never seen that on our patch. So again, that's part of the desire to get clarification.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, it is a question whether Mr. Palmer addresses it now, or perhaps we get a amplification from the Waters team in regard to the next item on the agenda. I noticed that Councillor Blackler, and yeah, he did talk to me before he produced this notice of motion as well, and I like the way that recommendation one is now worded. But he does say on the second page, Te Mana Atawai has provided a series of acceptable solutions for smaller schemes in the rural context to give users ways to tailor solutions, etc., etc. The difficulty I have is the next report seems to suggest that they're doing no such thing, and actually waving a big stick and choosing to sort of essentially bully people into doing things the way they want them done. So can somebody just give us a bit more information? Who in Te Mana Atawai has provided these acceptable solutions, and what are they?
Could I make a suggestion in terms of a procedure that maybe you let this lie on the table, we go to the next item, and then you come back to this and consider the necessity of it when you've had the answers in terms of the proposals in terms of acceptable solutions for the various schemes. And then that's an opportunity to ask the questions in terms of those discussions, that have been had with the regulator in terms of what are acceptable solutions. That's my suggestion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, is there any objection to moving to the next item? Okay, so we'll move to 6.6, sorry, 6.7. And welcome, Marty and Caitlin.
Thank you.
Yep, you're on, yep.
All right, so it's quite a long report here in front of you and lots to consider. So in October 2023, Te Mata Arawai communicated their expectations for achieving compliance with protozoa barrier requirements for 8 council-owned water supplies. 4 of these are managed by council and 4 by Corridor Water Management Limited. So the expectation is that an appropriate protozoa barrier, be in place by December this year for all of these supplies. Furthermore, in November 2023, they followed up with communications setting out expectations for bacterial treatment to be installed on 3 council-owned supplies. They're 3 supplies without chlorine at the moment. It was entirely not unexpected. That was following the Queenstown Cryptosporidium outbreak. So officers recommend that council attempts to meet the December deadline. Choosing not to meet could result in significant enforcement action. And the enforceable undertaking option that there is on the table is quite cumbersome. We also believe that Te Mata Arawai wouldn't accept the changes that we made to the enhanced annual plan by scaling back some of the treatment itself. So budgets have been proposed in the enhanced annual plan, but we can't afford to wait for the adoption of this because we need to start the upgrades now. So planning and procurement needs to start now, and we need agreement on the approaches for the upgrades. So just any questions?
Councillor Thompson.
So instruction from Te Mata Arawai has been verbal or written?
Written. Yeah.
Has that instruction been that we cannot use acceptable solutions to any of the schemes?
No, it says that we have to comply with the protozoa requirements and for some of the supplies, the bacteria requirements. The acceptable solutions only apply to a certain type of supply. It's got to have a certain amount of stock water in proportion to domestic, so predominantly stock water. So there's realistically only a couple of our supplies that fit into that category, most likely being Stoneburn and Bushy Creek. So yeah, they're absolutely an option for those supplies, and we have included them in our option analysis, but they didn't come out as the preferred option for us. So we have considered those acceptable solutions. An acceptable solution is where the point of entry devices come in. So that is essentially the acceptable solution. You can put treatment at a household rather than having treatment at the source.
My concern with Te Mata Arawai is that they are so prescriptive around risk management that basically acceptable solutions become a non-option. Would you say that's the case? Like, do you have to be very mindful of the risk management and the risk of someone actually having their own treatment on point of entry is too risky for what we would accept?
The legislation is quite clear that even if a point of entry device is put in it, we will still be the drinking water supplier, so we will still be responsible for them. So that's one part of the legislation, so that won't change. I think they're more than happy for an acceptable solution to be put in place. They just want it put in place by the required timeframes, and it has to meet a certain criteria and things like that. So if that is the way that we go, we put that in our plan at the end of June and say we want to meet one of the acceptable solutions. But as I said, officers weren't confident that was the best for any of our supplies.
My hope is that a discussion with Te Mata Arawai would be able to identify some alternative ways that actually help us manage it. That's minimal input by putting the onus onto property owners. But we will be having a session with Te Mata Arawai at some stage. Just need to sort out the time that works, but because we owe it to our communities to make sure that we're looking under every possible rock as far as finding any savings on some of these schemes, and particularly for the people on those schemes. But obviously, if it becomes a district-wide rating mechanism, then for everyone in the district. But Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, my question would be, on page 232, you talk about water suppliers being given the option to seek an enforceable undertaking. And you say that Te Mata Arawai has indicated that if we do, they would expect that the work being carried out to comply with the undertaking would be more than the minimum required scale back option. Now, if I read your report correctly, the principal proposal that might be currently scaled back is OHAL, because you're expecting community opposition. So if we did seek an enforceable undertaking, which might give us a bit more breathing space in terms of achieving the deadlines, what would the implications of that from a cost point of view be for the OHAL scheme? Please.
Through the chair. There's multiple, obviously, supplies, and they're all slightly different. The scale back option generally involves putting in one train of treatment as opposed to two trains as a backup. So what we've done with that is accepted some risk associated with doing the treatment upgrade. So if we have a single point of failure, then the supply would effectively be turned off until we replaced it. So that's the primary difference in cost between what we would recommend as officers and what the scale back option is worth, what we've currently got on the table.
And that doesn't just apply to OHAL. They've been scaled back for Stoneburn, Bushy Creek, just not the Corridale ones weren't supposed to be scaled back, I don't believe.
Councillor Percival.
It just seems crazy to me that we've got to treat water that's going, in some cases, up to 90% to stock. Why have we never considered encouraging privatisation of some of these smaller schemes? And why haven't we got onto that and kept that going? And it just seems absolutely ridiculous to me that you've got to go to this huge expense. And yeah, that's why I totally agree with Councillor Blackford's motion. Thank you.
Privatisation has been considered as the best option for our Hokomo. They have expressly said they would like that, and there is some debate over whether it is. And it's a very unusual arrangement. We don't even rate for it, so that one's quite straightforward. You have to be less than 500 or 200 consumers to be able to privatise. So not all of them fit within. Not all of them fit within the ability to be privatised. So
that's 200 people or
consumers. Yeah,
not houses. Carol.
Just on that, the larger ones, as in Takaraki, with I'm not quite sure exactly how many, but I know they've got over 200. Couldn't they be separated within that pumping area or their supply area? Why do they have to maintain that if they've got more than one pump or distribution sort of, what do you call it? Distribution field, like you've got.
Is it based on water take and single water take supply?
It's for the entire supply. So Takaraki has over 500 consumers. And it's the entire supply. It's not broken down into zones or anything like that. It's the supply in general. So I would have to have a separate source.
Okay. Councillor Thompson and then Councillor McCain.
I don't think anyone has a problem with the fact that we are required to supply safe water. But I'm concerned, and I share councillor Blackler's concern that we're not looking outside of the model. I know, for example, I have comprehensive knowledge of the Stoneburn because I actually farmed where the intake come from for 25 years. So I know the quality of the water there. I also know that we're working with an area that has probably an average of a 32 inch rainfall. And if we look at the textbook and look at the size of a house roof and that, you'll go, oh, they can't sustain the drinking water off that house. But most of those properties have an inordinate roof area because they all have large covered yards attached to the shearing shed that's normally adjacent to the house. So that there is potential that instead of us spending $3.5 million to upgrade intake, those houses could all put in a 30,000 litre tank each and sustain their drinking water as rainwater outside of the system, which would be a far better long-term cost to council. So again, the challenge in seeking to confront Te Mata Arawai, Councillor Blackler actually, and I don't know how he did it other than playing on Google, but he ended up talking to one of their chief advisors. And the response from that individual was, if you have problems, come back to me and I'll help talk you through them. So to me, if we simply accept the advice as this is the gold-plated alternative, we exclude the opportunity to be more cost-effective for not only council but the ratepayer.
Thank you. Councillor McCain.
I'm just wondering, how much more work do you need to do, say, all this is here by December? A lot of this work should have been done, should it not? Because we've been at this since 2007 and 17 it re-changed again. So it should be just sitting there ready to go. Is that right?
A lot of them have had a certain level of design done. So now it needs procurement, purchase of the materials and things like that, and actually tendering to engage the contractor to do the work. But for a number of them, the likes of Ohau, Bushy Creek, Stoneburn, we've got good information there already, so we are in a good place to start them.
So the equipment that's needed to tick these boxes, how available is it? Is there a waiting list for it? Is it in short supply or is it readily available?
Yeah, good question. We do know that Queenstown picked up a lot of the UV units that were available in the country. There is a delay in getting some of this gear, but a certain amount of the treatment can be put in place reasonably quickly. Some of it, there's some lag times on the pumps and UV units and the like. That's why we need to know now. If we're trying to meet the December deadline, which is what we're recommending, we need a decision today on approving the projects for the enhanced annual plan ahead of the consultation that we're about to do.
Do you further one?
One more, if I may. So it says here you had risk assessments done by Y-Comply and identified boil water notices. Did it actually trip the compliance numbers that are needed to actually do that, or is that just a safety thing?
The boil water notices were issued because we felt that there was a risk across all of the supplies, knowing what had happened in Queenstown without them having protozoa barriers. Corriedale felt the same, and we felt the only way to address that risk was to have boil water notices in place until treatment was in place that could reduce that risk or eliminate that risk.
Deputy Mayor Halverson.
Thank you through the chair. I guess I'm just kind of listening to the conversation and I'm hearing that a number of the councillors want to explore a pragmatic approach that Councillor Blackler is suggesting. And then I understand that councillor McCain's approach is probably looking at the timing and how to coordinate something if an independent review is completed within the timeframes, or if not by December, whether we seek an exception while we explore other options. I did speak to councillor Blackler yesterday, and he does have a connection with Taumata Arowe. And I just think that in terms of just all the pressure that government are putting on us, that it doesn't actually quite hurt just to kind of explore every single option that we have. I understand the risk assessment because I'm actually supportive of it, but on the other side, I do want to make sure that we do make a considered governance decision as well that includes a bit of a pragmatic approach as well, that may be even more affordable for a lot of these property owners as well. So I guess that's where I'm coming from, that I'm hearing that they want to explore those options, what the procedural kind of option is. Let this lie on the table, go back to the other paper before. I'm not too sure. It's just where I'm sharing that view.
Councillor Percival.
Yeah, if we're responsible for the health and welfare of consumer, so you've got your point of supply and that's where you're treating it. How can we as council still be responsible for the quality of that water when it gets into that dwelling? And what I'm saying is I've totally always supported the point of entry treatment, but I don't understand how we can be responsible for the consumer when we don't have control over that water once it leaves our point of supply.
I mean, that is the whole point of the changes that have occurred. If we are a water supplier, we are a water supplier until it gets out of the tap. And that's the mandate of Te Mata Arowa. It's saying, if you are responsible, that's why the acceptable solutions are for very small schemes. They want to be able to hold someone to account other than the consumer. And so by default, that is us. That's why you're getting these suggestions. And to go back to the Deputy Mayor's point, essentially, there's only one or two of these where there might be a more affordable solution. Picking up Councillor Thompson's point about maybe collecting rainwater and things like that. Most of these, this is the bare minimum solution. And as the team have said, what we're proposing is, Te Mata Arawa's first comment is that they're not even sure that is a bare minimum solution. So, sorry, to use terms like gold plated, none of this is gold plated. So I suppose the team will continue to look to what is most affordable because that's important to us and it's important to the communities, and that's the objective here. But most of these, this is the bare minimum we need to do. We need to get on with most of these. It can still accommodate Councillor Blackler's notion about, there are a couple where maybe there is something else we can do, and we can look at those. But we need to the council needs to make a commitment to essentially doing as much as it possibly can to meet the requirements by the end of the year. And some of these just, really are almost no-brainers. It's like we just have to get on with a solution that will meet the requirement. I had a very productive meeting with the chair of Corridale Water Management last week. They've had a meeting last week as well. I think they have moved quite significantly in their views of what they need to do to meet the standards. And I think, we've pretty much joined up on, this one. This is the most economical and most fit for purpose. And those are the bigger schemes. They're supplying quite a not insignificant part of the population of this district. And they are I think they have made quite a shift in accepting that they need to protect their consumers as well. And the obligation sits with them and sits with us. And, we're also talking about having revisiting the agreement we have with them and getting that agreed, signed off by them and signed off by council in the very near future, because the previous arrangement and we were told it would not be acceptable to the entity and to the DIA, but now that has changed, so we can get that in place. But, you know, we're down to a couple where, okay, maybe there might be able to be something different done, but virtually all of the ones here, I think, you know, there's a good solution, and some there is, there's no choice. So we need to get on with it, have any hope of meeting the December deadline. Which I think I'm personally not too interested in being the one that Te Mata Aramai makes an example of, because they will be looking for someone to line up and give a good smack. I mean, that's the nature of a regulator. It's like, I'd rather, you know, have a good plan, make that decision, make that commitment, and be able to go back to them and then work on the finer details of some of the smaller schemes.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, the difficulty here is we are getting mixed messages. We have one councillor who says he's been engaged with Te Mata Arawai, and Te Mata Arawai, or that source, has said, oh no, we're quite happy for you to have acceptable solutions, and so and so and so. The report here says Steve Taylor and others appear to be saying, do it our way, no ifs, no buts, no maybes. The problem I have is I don't think we're going to get all, even if we voted for all of your recommendations on page 229 today, I don't think we'd get them done by December anyway. And we certainly wouldn't be able to look at any alternative options anywhere in the interim. I can't see why we are so loath to seek an enforceable undertaking decision. It says, the report says that we don't think we can meet the deadlines, we can ask for that. And what I would like to know, and you've gone on to say, well, yes, but if we get one of those, we might have to up the ante a bit and do a bit more. So there's a cost to that, but it isn't being quantified, and that doesn't help me either. Because if I knew that the cost of asking for an enforceable undertaking was going to add 2 million to the bill, or 500,000 or whatever, that would certainly help me arrive at a reasonable conclusion. To be told we have to decide today to get the deadline is pretty problematic. This is obviously something that might have been helpful if we could have unpacked earlier. So again, why are we so averse to asking for an enforced undertaking ruling from Te Mata Arawai?
I'll give my understanding of it, and then you can get the correct text. But basically, that means they completely prescribe what you do, and it's like bugger the cost. And you lose any influence about the solution. This is what you will do, and you will do it now. That is the nature of an enforceable undertaking. So to do it across all of those would, you lose any control.
Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, I'm perplexed as to why there might be some ambiguity, because we've been discussing waters and the standards required and what we need to invest in it for, well, ever since I got here 2.5 years ago. The letter that was sent to me and the email that was sent to me was quoted in the report there. But for the avoidance of doubt, it says, if our expectations are not met, we will use any of our enforcement powers we consider appropriate in the circumstances. These are likely to be less flexible than the current opportunity you have to determine how best to respond to this situation within the timeframes you've indicated. So they're very clear that they'll look to take enforcement action against us, and we need a plan. If we use our best endeavours to deliver a plan, then they're less likely to take enforcement action against us if there's circumstances beyond our control, such as the availability of pumps or UV equipment. But I think further, a deliberate decision not to progress with a plan, a reasonable plan to meet the standards, exposes us legally. We know that on testing, some of these supplies do have E. coli in them. And that exposes us to, risk of prosecution, that we haven't met the water standards. And if someone is harmed by that as a result of us not meeting the water standards. But if we've not met the water standards and we've deliberately not agreed to meet the water standards, we haven't got a leg to stand on, legally, I'd suggest. So it'd be myself in the dock on that account. So if you're not going to agree a plan to upgrade these water standards, then I ask that you indemnify me and my staff from any potential prosecution that may arise from your decision not to upgrade these water services as outlined in the plan.
Councillor McCann.
So, yeah, to me, we are being asked to make a decision on, we don't know the full facts of what Te Mare Arawai, what they're, so what I'm trying to say, how far down the track are we? How available is the equipment, and just we're trying to make a decision on the outcome that we don't actually know what the end game is at the minute, in my opinion. So how much time do you guys need?
At this stage, our project teams are confident that they can deliver treatment solutions for Bushy Creek, O'Hare and Stoneburn, the ones that council manages, and the Corridale Water Management is confident they can deliver the treatment necessary for their 4 supplies also by December. Because what is being proposed to put in is a level of treatment that it's certainly not gold plated, as Paul said before. This is what we think we need to put in to make sure we can meet the standards essentially by December. And for some of them, like O'Hare, we're proposing to move away from what we've always said we think is the best solution, and we still think groundwater for O'Hare is the best solution. But we know that that's unlikely to get that over the line before then. So we're proposing to treat the water because that's safer than leaving it like it is currently as well, with visitors visiting O'Hare, not necessarily knowing there's a permanent boil water notice in place, drinking the water, getting sick. It's best to not only meet the expectations by December, not only because it makes us compliant, but because it does reduce significant risk to those consuming the water.
Yeah, so what is our timeline? That's what I'm getting at. So, how far further down the track have we got time to sit around the table with Te Mare Arawai and find out exactly what they want for each individual scheme? Where are we at as far as that information comes from?
Yeah, through the chair. The standards are very clear as to what we have to do to treat to meet the protozoa and bacterial compliance. Very, very clear. So we have that answer now. We could start ordering stuff tomorrow or later today if you agree to these resolutions. And that'll get us in a good position, in a best possible place to at least attempt to achieve the December deadline. And as long as we're acting in an appropriate manner moving forward with these supplies, we believe Te Mare Arawai will allow us to continue without enforcement action.
Councillors, time is not our friend, not for this meeting and not for what we're looking for as far as solutions go. I think we will have a community that's asking why are we spending $3 million, $4 million on the water scheme when most of it goes to stock water, etc. I think we need to be able to answer that. It would be really handy if we did have the options reports for each of the water schemes that have been carried out. So that we do have, we can say this is why doesn't work or whatever. So our staff, are those available? Can they be made available to us?
We actually provided them after the last LTP when we were talking about a lot of these through the LTP process, and those documents for Stoneburn and Bushy Creek were made available. The O'Hare one, probably not, but we're also not proposing the solution that's in that. We don't have one for our Hokomo, and the other 4 are under Corridale management.
So we haven't done options reports on those.
I understand they don't have options reports on the other 4. So we have Bushy Creek and Stoneburn.
That's slightly problematic. Councillors, looking for a way forward. So, Councillor Hopkins.
Well, it's not like one very quick question. In the report here, you say that the O'Hare solution is one that's tailored to avoid opposition from residents and so on. and that a further, we'll do it in 2 stages, and the solution we're proposing is going to need an upgrade later and that'll cost more. So what is the actual cost of doing it that way rather than doing it once and doing it right?
I understand that the budgets we've put forward are in the order of $1 million for them. So in the order of that, but to go groundwater would be, I guess, double that, to add groundwater onto it as well. And
Yeah, in that order.
yeah, because it would require getting a consent for a bore and drilling the bores, things like that.
So for Lake Opal as the example, what we're going to do is treat the existing source, treat it in town in a containerized, that's what the current proposal, containerized system. And at a future date, if the existing surface water take doesn't stack up, then we would propose to drill a bore and pipe it to the new treatment plant.
Council are looking for someone to move either the recommendation or some alternative motion. More questions, Councillor Holding?
So just for the 4 that don't have the options, and I'm assuming might be where Councillor Blackler's solutions is maybe what he's pointing at. Where is the flexibility in building that into the plan by June 24? Or Paul said there was some flexibility of looking at other ways. How do we do that in that time frame?
You're talking about through the chair, you're talking about the 4 suppliers, the corridor water supplies.
Yeah, I see.
We assume they've done some amount of work on how they're going to comply. Did you get getting a nod? Yeah. I don't think those suppliers, I know those suppliers won't be the ones that will fall into the category of acceptable solutions, just there's too many people on them.
Councillor McCone?
Can I ask under option 1, why it says continue with the original program for all supplies, but not meet the December 2024 deadline? Why will we not do it under the current program?
Through the chair, that would require the adoption of the enhanced annual plan come late June this year. So effectively would stall us on those upgrades for 3 months, 4 months.
To advance things, I'm willing to move the recommendations on page 228, I think it is.
229.
229.
So.
Yes, correct.
Do we have a seconder?
Well, I'm moving the 6.7 meeting Te Mata Arawai requirements for protozoa and bacterial barriers. The report's author is Margaret Mitchell. The authorizer is Paul. There are 2 recommendations, 1 A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, and 2. And I'm moving those.
And I'm asking if we have a seconder.
Yeah, I think Jeremy's Justin.
Okay. Councillor Holding, thank you. No, I don't, as much as we want options, I don't know that we've got a lot of options. I think we do need to do something, and staff need to get on and start action. I understand that. I think we do need to schedule the session that the governance team will have with Te Mata Arawai. It will be with CE and one of his staff members, so that we can actually vent our frustration, I think, at some of these application of standards, perhaps to him, at him, whatever, basically to convey our concern about the lack of flexibility in how we actually deliver what the outcomes need to be for our community. I'm not questioning those outcomes, it's just how do we actually deliver them best. So I think we schedule that as soon as possible. We have that discussion. The team needs to get on and do some of the work and so forth. I think if they buy equipment in the current market, it's not going to be a problem to sell it on if we find there's a much cheaper, better solution that's available to us. But if we don't find that, then at least they've made a start, and they can prove that they are using best endeavours to get the required upgrades done in a timely manner. So reluctantly, I'm supporting this. I do thank staff for the work that they've done on this. It's not easy, and I know you may see something that seems very straightforward and very self-explanatory, but obviously we're having difficulty with that on behalf of our particularly rural ratepayers who potentially have to foot the bill for that. So, councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Hopkins?
Very briefly, I think the stark reality of this was brought home to me this morning when the chief executive said that if we didn't do this, he was going to ask us to formally indemnify him and his staff. Clearly, let's be blunt, our staff are being bullied by a government agency that is using a big stick and threatening. That is frustrating and it's annoying. The ambiguity I was talking about earlier was that allegedly there are people within Te Mata Arawai saying, no, we're not like that. We're quite happy for you to come up with affordable solutions. But when the rubber hits the road, it's do it our way or we'll throw the book at you. So my view is this gives us a chance to actually look at some alternatives, but it also enables the staff to get on with doing what it looks as though they are being compelled to do by the agency. So it doesn't close the door to alternative and cheaper options and affordable solutions a la the Te Mata Arawai proposal. But it does enable staff to do something that if we didn't do it today, we'd probably be asked by the chief executive to indemnify everyone in the room who isn't an elected member.
Well said. Councillor Cowles.
Yeah, I echo those comments. I know it's a difficult situation for us to be sitting in, but as it currently stands, clearly there is a direction to do that. I think we do need to quickly engage ourselves and ask some of these questions. But as it stands today, we can't ask any of the team to do things that are unlawful. I don't believe.
Okay, with that, I'm going to ask Councillor McCone to finish off and then we'll put it to the vote.
Yeah, look, I know we've got to do it by legislation, but it goes completely against everything that rural water schemes and smaller schemes do. For the lumber costs and everything else. I agree with Councillor Thompson, we must supply potable drinking water. But I think the standards have gone from 9 o'clock to around to 3 o'clock. They've gone from one extreme to the other. And while we've got to do it, we do have to do it, but we must do it in the most affordable and manner that people can afford, because some of the stuff is just way over the top for the cost structure. So I think we need to be pedaling rather than swimming in an Olympic final, but and just let it be guided by Te Mata Arawai, because things are changing politically as well. So I think yeah, let's not just rush in, but let's also comply with what we have to.
I'm going to put it, those in favour say aye. And against? Yeah. That's carried. And we're 25 minutes into when we were going to break for lunch. I'm suggesting we break for lunch for 20 minutes. We come back and if we can do this, that we will do the public excluded part, perhaps closer to around 4 o'clock when the PAR meeting finishes. So we'll need to seek responses from those who are supposed to be coming for that session. At 1 o'clock, we will come back to finish up the last couple of items for the council public agenda. and we will see how that goes. So thanks very much, everyone, for participation up to now. Councillor Thompson?
Just a point of clarification, Mr Mayor, so we were coming back to councillor Blacklist's notice of motion. Are you leaving that sitting on the table?
No, it's not sitting on the table. If it's sitting on the table, then it has to come back at the next meeting, not this meeting. So we definitely didn't have it lying on the table. We basically will be coming back to that one at 1 o'clock. That's the next one. Thanks, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Oh, yeah.
Simon doesn't try and.
Keith, because I've already seen.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why.